Chapter 382. Ze held the storage bag and shook her head. My master's name is Nongzhu, not Xiaoyao. Is there anyone called Xiaoyao among your master's friends? Or, have you ever heard of a person called Xiaoyao from your master? Jade Flower Fairy asked. No. Ze thought for a while and said. When and where did your master accept you as a disciple? Jade Flower Fairy asked again. I don't know. Ze shook her head and said, I've been with my master for as long as I can remember. He didn't tell me when and where he accepted me. Where does your master live? Can you take me to have a look? I can't tell you that, nor can I take you there. Not everyone can go there. Ze refused. Hearing this, Jade Flower Fairy was disappointed and became silent. Yu Qianqiu didn't say a word. His eyes sneaked glances at this and then at that. There was a scene in his mind. The old handsome guy changed his name to Xiaoyao. Back then, when he was playing around outside, he picked up a beautiful woman and got her pregnant. After the beautiful woman gave birth to a child, she suddenly realized that the child and the man were gone. She searched for them for a long time but still couldn't find them. In fact, the old handsome man secretly took the child away. In order to avoid trouble, the old handsome man told the child that he was her master. When the child grew up, she also thought that he was her master. In fact, they were father and daughter. Interesting. Interesting. Only a handsome man like Nongzhu could get such a beautiful woman so easily. Only a beautiful woman like Qianghua could attract a handsome man like Nongzhu easily. It seemed that Nongzhu was too much of a playboy. She gave birth to a child for him, but he ran away. It was too wicked. Yu Qianqiu smiled. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was true. Is there a red crescent birthmark on the inside of your left arm? Jade Flower Fairy suddenly asked. Ze subconsciously looked at her arm and asked curiously, You? How did you know I have a birthmark on my arm? Qianghua Fairy became excited and took a step forward. However, Huarui stopped her and shook her head slightly. She pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said, Master, this is Yu Qianqiu. Here. Listening to their conversation, Yu Qianqiu is 100% sure that Ze is the daughter of Jasper Flower Fairy. He is secretly happy, thinking that he has something on Nongzhu. Ze suddenly shoves the storage bag into his hand. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, he sheepishly stuffed the storage bag into his own storage bag. The Jade Flower Fairy immediately asked, Ze, why did you give him the money? Before Ze can speak, Yu Qianqiu hurriedly said, I keep it for her. She can use it whenever she wants. Although Ze didn't understand why he said that, she believed that there must be a reason, so she nodded. Qianghua Fairy, who has been in a superior position for a long time, is naturally not easy to fool. The sadness on her face turned into indifference in an instant. She stared at Yu Qianqiu and asked, Are you Yu Qianqiu, who betrayed the sect twice? Why is Ze with you? As a supreme master, she naturally hates people like this the most. And Yu Qianqiu also hates it when people talk about him like this. But for the sake of such a beautiful woman and Ze's mother, he didn't care about it. He thought for a while and sighed, Ze, you heard it. Why don't you go back? I don't have a good reputation. If you follow me, you will be implicated sooner or later. You go back first, and I will explain to your master later. I won't go back. Hearing that, Ze immediately glared at him. She hasn't finished the task that Senior Bai asked her to do. How can she go back now? She stared at the Jade Flower Fairy and said, Although you gave me more money, you did it voluntarily. It's none of your business who I'm with. The Jade Flower Fairy's beautiful face suddenly froze. She looked at Ze who wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. She could scold anyone except Ze. Finally, she stared at Yu Qianqiu and asked, Do you know Ze's master? Yu Qianqiu said with a wry smile, I don't just know her. Ziyi's master asked me to bring her out. I don't want to. But her master's cultivation is too high. I can't do anything about it. Anyone who heard that they were not welcome would be unhappy, and Ziyi was no exception. Her pretty face was almost frozen. She stared at Yu Qianqiu coldly. Yu Qianqiu shrank his head. It seemed that he was completely afraid of this woman. It seemed that only now did he look like he was taking care of her money. The Jade Flower Fairy and Hua Rui were both stunned. They didn't expect that the audacious Yu Qianqiu would be so afraid of Ziyi, and they didn't expect that Ziyi would be so tough. The Jade Flower Fairy looked at Yu Qianqiu in a more relaxed way. She asked, Do you know where Ziyi's master lives? Yes. We came out from her master's place this time. Before Yu Qianqiu finished his words, Ziyi shouted, Yu Qianqiu, if you dare to tell others where my master and I live, don't blame me for being rude to you. I won't tell you. Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. Ziyi turned her head and warned the Jade Flower Fairy, I don't care what kind of master you are, but there are some things you'd better not know. The Jade Flower Fairy was stunned again. She looked at Yu Qianqiu again and felt that he had been wronged. She even thought of a possibility. In this saber drawing competition, people said that Yu Qianqiu wanted to collect money. However, she had never heard that Yu Qianqiu was a greedy person. This time, he even took out such a treasure. Could it be that he was forced by Ziyi? If that was the case, then Yu Qianqiu had indeed been wronged. Yu Qianqiu said to her with a bitter smile, We've been here. If there's nothing else, we'll leave now. They had come here to get the money. Now, not only did they get the money, but they also had an extra 30 million yuan. Moreover, they knew a secret. Why not leave? Wait. The Jade Flower Fairy's voice was much gentler. Looking at the two of them, she frowned slightly and said, It's too dangerous for you two to walk around the cultivation world alone. Why don't you join the Cultivation World Alliance? At least most cultivators won't do anything to you under the current circumstances. Will the Cultivation Alliance accept us? Yu Qianqiu asked. He kind of wanted to join. Even if he didn't put in any effort, at least they could share information. That way, it would be more convenient for him to do many things. The Jade Flower Fairy's eyes paused on the two of them. The Cultivation Alliance might not accept them. One had a bad reputation and violated the taboo of the cultivation world, and the other had an unknown background. After thinking for a while, she made up her mind and said, I'll be your guarantor. The Cultivation Alliance should accept you. Why don't you stay here for the time being? I'll let you know when it's done. The Moon Clan wanted a man to stay overnight? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He hesitated and decided not to be the first. He shook his head and said, Thank you for your help, senior. We still have to go to the 10,000 demons. We'll leave now. As soon as he finished speaking, Purple Dress flew away with a whoosh. Obviously, Purple Dress didn't have a good impression of the Moon Clan leader. Yu Qianqiu smiled helplessly at the Jade Flower Fairy. His long sword popped out and he chased after Purple Dress quickly. The Jade Flower Fairy hurried to the railing and looked longingly at the two figures disappearing into the depths of the stars. Hua Rui walked over and said softly, Sister, are you sure it's her? Who else could it be? Her eyes are so similar to that heartless man. And the crescent-shaped birthmark on her hand. The Jade Flower Fairy's eyes were already misty with tears. Ah! When I first saw her, I thought she looked like you. That feeling was very strong. I didn't expect it to be her. Hua Rui sighed. Suddenly, she turned around and asked, Sister, do you suspect that her master is brother-in-law? The Jade Flower Fairy shook her head and said in confusion, I'm not sure. Back then, Xiaoyao was an ordinary man who wandered around. I was fascinated by him and was attracted by him. After so many years, I always thought that the father and daughter had already passed away. Now that I see Ze, I suddenly realize that the name Xiaoyao is not like the name of an ordinary person. How can an ordinary person be as free and unfettered as he is? Mr. Nongzhu. Didn't Xiaoyao always play with a purple-black bamboo flute in his hand? When I first saw brother-in-law, I knew he was not an ordinary man. But I couldn't tell that he was also a cultivator. I didn't expect. Hua Rui smiled bitterly and said, I didn't expect him to be a hidden master. Sister, you didn't see what happened. The 7 cultivators in the last phase of the nature's test were all scared when they heard his name. You can imagine how powerful brother-in-law's cultivation is. It's funny that we didn't see it at all after spending so much time with him. He hid it from me so well. The Jade Flower Fairy was about to cry. Sister, why did brother-in-law secretly take purple dress away? Didn't he have a reason? I don't think brother-in-law is an unreasonable person. Hua Rui asked in confusion. After purple dress was born, I saw that she had the spiritual root of cultivation, so I told Xiaoyao about my identity as a cultivator. Xiaoyao didn't seem to care at all. I should have noticed it at that time. How could a mortal be so indifferent after knowing our existence? The Jade Flower Fairy smiled bitterly and said, then I told him that mortals have a short lifespan. I wanted to bring purple dress back to the Moon Clan to cultivate. Who knew that he would strongly oppose it? We even had a fight about it. The next day, he disappeared with his daughter. Hua Rui was silent for a while and said, in that case, the reason makes sense. Brother-in-law is a hidden master, so he might not be interested in a sect like the Moon Clan. Brother-in-law might want to teach purple dress personally. Otherwise, how could she have reached the last phase of the nature's test at her age? At least with our Moon Clan's ability, we can't do that. In that case, why did he hide it from me? If he let me know his identity, I would have let purple dress go with him. Then we wouldn't have lost contact for so many years. The Jade Flower Fairy smiled miserably and said, I think he's just like his name. He's used to being free and unfettered. After being with me for a long time, he thinks I'm annoying. What master? Could it be a master in the soul formation stage? It's not impossible. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to scare the 7 cultivators in the last phase of the nature's test. Hua Rui reminded, Sister, do you remember the mysterious master who appeared during the trial in the demon realm? The few masters and elders of the Fuxian island were all injured. Didn't you say that the mysterious master could be a soul formation cultivator? If there really is a soul formation cultivator in this world, why can't brother-in-law be one? The mysterious Mr. Nongzhu. The Jade Flower Fairy smiled miserably and said, Xiaoyao is a soul formation cultivator. Is it really possible? Why did he hide it from me? Chapter 383. The night sky was bright, and the man and woman flying in the sky were the first to bear the sunlight. Yu Qianqiu looked at Ze from time to time, with a weird smile on his face. This girl's mother was really generous. She was much more generous than Nongzhu. Nongzhu. Xiaoyao. He, always walking among flowers without leaving his real name, tut. This old handsome man was really a master of picking flowers. He. If you dare to touch me again, I will bring Jasper Flower Fairy to your purple bamboo forest in the South Sea one day and see what will happen. Yu Qianqiu smiled even more happily when he thought about how he would be able to teach that shrewd Nongzhu a lesson. He actually faintly looked forward to this day. In the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea, Nongzhu of the Langxian courtyard was kneeling beside the tea table in the room. Suddenly, she felt her nose itch. She touched her nose and asked curiously, is someone plotting against me? Why do I feel like sneezing? She shook her head and placed 2 cups made of purple bamboo. She lifted the teapot that was boiling on the stove and filled the 2 cups with fragrant tea. She put the teapot aside and pushed a cup of tea to Bai Changchun with two slender fingers. Nongzhu looked at Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged, and said angrily, "Why did you come to me again?" Bai Changchun, who had always been serious, smiled lightly and said, "When I heard that the purple bamboos here are blooming, I missed the time when we first met. You treated me with this purple bamboo-scented tea. It still lingers on my tongue and I can't stop thinking about it. It's really a rare fragrant tea. After so many years, how can I not come when the purple bamboos are blooming again?" From the tone of their conversation, it could be heard that they had a close relationship. No one had ever seen Bai Changchun talk to someone in this tone. "Old Bai, now that you mention it, I remember that when you came here for the first time, the purple bamboos were blooming the next day. After the flowers withered, a large number of purple bamboos died. Some time ago, after you Qianzhou came, the purple bamboo forest blossomed again the next day. Are you too the nemesis of my purple bamboo forest? If not, it's too much of a coincidence." Nongzhu said doubtfully. "Dead again?" Bai Changchun was startled as he held the teacup in his hand. Nongzhu shook her head painfully and said, "Once a bamboo blooms, it's a sign of withering. Hundreds of purple bamboos. It's gone again. 100 or so bamboos, to the purple bamboo forest, is just a drop in the bucket." Bai Changchun said indifferently, and began to slowly taste the fragrant tea. Nongzhu was so angry that she raised her eyebrows and glared at him. She shouted, "I won't let you drink this tea." Bai Changchun stretched out his hand and snatched the teacup from the other party's hand. Not minding it, he said indifferently, "I advise you not to disturb me while I'm drinking tea. Otherwise, I guarantee that you won't see a single bamboo in this southern sea purple bamboo forest ever again." This was a blatant threat. Rongzhu stood up abruptly and scolded, "Bai Changchun, you're using the fact that your cultivation is higher than mine to threaten me." Bai Changchun suddenly sighed and said, "When I first met you, I drank purple bamboo flower tea once. This is the second time. The day the East Holy Land opens is not far away. I wonder if I will have a third chance in this lifetime." Nongzhu was startled. She looked at the teacup in her hand and said with a twitching expression, "You're using the soft approach when the hard approach doesn't work." Although she saw through his intention, she still sat down and put the teacup in front of Bai Changchun. She asked, "Do you really think that you Qianzhou, can solve the current situation? You'll know after you try." Bai Changchun picked up the teacup and drank. "Try? This is such a big thing, and you're just randomly sending a disciple to try?" Nongzhu immediately jumped up and pointed at him, scolding, "Bai Changchun, it turns out that what you said about stargazing at night is fake. If you want to try, let your apprentice have a try. Why do you have to involve my daughter? What are you planning?" "No, I have to call Zi back." "What's the hurry?" Bai Changchun said indifferently, "Zi should go out and take a walk. Look at her, she has been with you for so many years. Other than her cultivation improving, what do you think she has learned from you? She knows nothing. Maybe she can learn a lot from you Qianzhou. At least there's no danger." Nongzhu said loudly, "I can let her live a carefree life, a life that everyone dreams of. This is not Ziyi's dream. This is your dream. What's the difference between a pig and a life without joy, anger, sorrow, and joy?" Bai Changchun looked at Nongzhu and sneered, "Don't use your selfishness as an excuse to protect your daughter. You just don't want your daughter to leave you. An eagle will spread its wings one day. If you follow an eagle, you will starve to death sooner or later. A cultivator at the final stage of the nature's test doesn't know what the world is like. You're really a good father." "I'm selfish?" Nongzhu's face changed. After a moment of silence, she shook her head and said, "No, it's too dangerous to follow you Qianzhou. You don't know your disciple's character. He is born to cause trouble. He is called the scum of the cultivation world. I don't expect Zi to learn anything from him. Ze is not a little girl anymore. It's too late for you to teach her something now. Let her follow you, Qianqiu. Maybe the way of educating the scum of the cultivation world is more appropriate than that of a father like you. Bai Changchun took a sip of tea, stared at Nongzhu and shook his head. Don't worry. Let Ze face it bravely. You often travel in the secular world. You should know that more hardships are not entirely a bad thing. At least I believe that you Qianqiu will have a way to protect your daughter when she is really in danger. Old man Bai, be honest. Am I really as bad as you said? Nongzhu asked with a pale face. You're too good. You hurt Ze. Bai Changchun suddenly sighed. When I left the Bai family, I was worried about what would happen to my family without my protection. Later, although there were many hardships, I didn't intervene. As a result, they got to where they are now step by step, better than I imagined. Nongzhu, do you really want to take care of Ze for the rest of her life? Nongzhu didn't say anything. He turned around and walked out slowly, feeling lonely. Bai Changchun watched his figure disappear into the depths of the bamboo forest. He picked up his tea and continued to drink as if nothing had happened. On the beach, a melodious flute sounded. Nongzhu held the flute horizontally to his mouth. Facing the sea breeze, his 10 slender fingers moved up and down. The music he played was as lonely as his mood, with a touch of sadness. The waves gently surged in front of his feet. Before long, a flock of seagulls fluttered their wings and landed around him, as if they were also listening. At this moment, a dozen water columns suddenly sprayed out of the sea. Then, a dozen huge fish tails swung out of the sea, making waves and disappeared. Hua, hua. A dozen humpback whales jumped out of the sea, turned around and smashed into the sea. The waves danced, and a dozen of their backs came out of the sea. They swam toward Nongzhu together, as if they had heard the call of Nongzhu's flute. Nongzhu kept playing the flute and walked slowly to the sea. He stepped on the waves as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. After walking dozens of meters on the sea, the leading whale in front of him left the group, swam directly into the water, and gently lifted Nongzhu up. Nongzhu stood on the back of a whale while playing the sad song. Accompanied by a group of whales, he kept walking toward the deep sea. The sound of the flute penetrated the sea and spread around. 3 old men were flying fast in the sky. The leading one was the white-robed old man on the snow mountain. The other 2 must have high cultivation to be able to keep up with his flying speed. After a while, the island where the South Sea purple bamboo forest was located was in the sight of the 3. When they were approaching and about to land, they suddenly heard the melodious flute coming from the distant sea. They looked at each other, and the white-robed old man said, "It's Nongzhu's flute. Nongzhu is not on the island. Let's go." The 3 quickly flew over the purple bamboo forest. Bai Changchun, who was in the house below, paused for a moment with a teacup in his hand. The sky was blue and the sea was wide. Riding a whale in the sea, Nongzhu seemed to have figured something out. The sound of the flute gradually became clearer. The accompanying humpback whales also became cheerful and jumped out of the sea from time to time. Suddenly, 3 sharp whistles came from the sky, followed by 3 huge chi forces falling from the sky. More than a dozen whales became a little restless. Nongzhu stopped playing the flute and saw the 3 elders slowly descending from the sky. They floated about 3 or 4 meters above the sea surface and surrounded him in the middle. "Nongzhu, you're really living a leisurely life." The white-robed old man snorted. Nongzhu held the flute in her hand and gently tapped it in her palm. She said in surprise, "Bing Chengzi." She then looked at the gray-robed old man on the left and the black-robed old man on the right. She frowned and said, "Hu Changshu, Yin Bai Kong, the 3 of you are experts at the late transforming realm. Are you looking for me?" The white-robed Bing Chengzi shouted, "Nongzhu, don't play dumb. You once said that you wouldn't interfere in the affairs of the cultivation world. Why did you break your promise? Nongzhu frowned and gently waved the flute in her hand. The whales all sank to the bottom of the sea. He stepped on the waves and sneered, "When did I break my promise to interfere in the affairs of the cultivation world? Bing Chengzi, don't think that you can talk nonsense just because your cultivation is high. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" He looked at the other two and said, "Are the two of you here to cause trouble for me?" The black-robed Yin Baikong laughed and said, "Brother Nongzhu, don't misunderstand. Brother Changsho and I were invited here to testify." "Testify? What kind of testimony?" Nongzhu asked as she looked at the position of the three. They were obviously afraid that she would run away, so they surrounded her. "Your disciple Ze was sent to the cultivation world of China by you. How dare you say that you didn't interfere?" Bing Chengzi shouted. Nongzhu snorted and said, "That's right. My disciple Ze did go to the cultivation world of China. So what? Does the cultivation world of China belong to your family, and others can't go there? Don't be anxious." Yin Baikong pressed his hands against the two of them and said to Nongzhu with a smile, "Brother Nongzhu, it's like this. Your disciple Ze is now together with someone called Yu Qianqiu. A few days ago, one of Bing Chengzi's disciples died in the hands of Yu Qianqiu. Bing Chengzi's other disciples did not take revenge because of your disciple Ze. We only want to know whether your disciple Ze has already been involved in the affairs of the cultivation world of China. Regardless of whether she has or not, we should take the opportunity to clarify things now. Brother Nongzhu, we advise you to bring Ze back to the South Ocean to prevent any misunderstandings. As for the past, we can let bygones be bygones for your sake. What do you think?" Nongzhu was slightly stunned. "That fellow, Yu Qianqiu, has already taken action? Could it be that you're ignoring my words? It seems that Bing Chengzi's disciples are all at the end of the tribulation transcendence. How could they be killed by him? This fellow is really a genius." Nongzhu looked at the three of them and pondered over this matter. Suddenly, she realized that Bai Changchun had appeared above their heads and was staring coldly down with his hands behind his back. "Why did you guys come today? Why did you guys come today? What a coincidence." Nongzhu touched her forehead with her hand and shook her head with a bitter smile. "It's fine if it's me, but these three experts at the end of the soul transformation realm didn't even notice that there's someone above them. The title of the world's #1 expert is really not just for show." Hu Changsho, who had been silent all this while, had an arrogant look on his face as he said aggressively, "What? Do the three of us have to pick an auspicious day to look for you? How would I dare?" Nongzhu waved her hand with a sarcastic expression. Pointing upwards, she shook her head and said, "Good luck to you guys." The three of them weren't afraid of him playing any tricks, so they raised their heads and looked up. But with just this glance, their expressions changed greatly, and they were almost scared out of their wits. Dressed in a light green robe, with a thin face and an icy gaze, he was staring at them indifferently, as if he was looking at a few ants. If it wasn't Bai Changchun, that killing god, who else could it be? The three of them immediately teleported dozens of meters away and stood in a row. The arrogance on Hu Changsho's face disappeared instantly. He pointed at Bai Changchun and asked, "Bai Changchun, what do you mean by standing above us?" The remaining meaning of his words was self-evident. "Do you want to sneak attack us?" Bai Changchun was indeed very conceited. He didn't even look at them. With his hands behind his back, he looked into the distant sky and said calmly, "What do you want?" The meaning of these words was clearly telling them, "Whatever meaning you want, I'll give it to you." Hu Changsho smacked his lips and didn't dare to say anything. Bing Chengzi said in a low voice, "Bai Changchun, this is a private matter between us and Nongzhu. You don't need to intervene." "Did I say that I want to intervene?" Bai Changchun said indifferently. He withdrew his gaze from the sky and looked at Bing Chengzi. He asked again, "Do you really want me to intervene?" Bing Chengzi's face stiffened. He didn't know what to say after hearing Chu Yang's words. The key was that this guy was too strong. The three of them weren't his match at all. If they said anything that made him unhappy, he would definitely take action immediately. Once he took action, he had never seen anyone survive under his hands. Talking to such a person was very stressful. It's a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. Let's not talk too much. Baikong tried to persuade them. Finally, he smiled at Bai Changchun and said, "Old Bai, we have something to discuss with Nongzhu. Don't think too much. We don't mean anything else." "How do you know that I'm thinking too much?" Bai Changchun's gaze fell on him again. Baikong's smiling face immediately squeezed together. He nodded repeatedly and said, "It's good that you're not thinking too much." Chapter 384. The conversation in front of her made Nongzhu slightly sigh in her heart. Just now, the three of them were using both carrot and stick to force her. But when they met Bai Changchun, even if Bai Changchun was aggressive, the three of them had to suppress their anger. This was the prestige of the world's #1 master. The three were experts at the late spirit severing stage, rare top cultivators in the world. They had never been bullied like this before. If it was in the past, they wouldn't have to be so humble. But since the battle in the East Sea, where 16 unconvinced spirit-severing experts were killed by Bai Changchun, no one in the world dared to go against Bai Changchun's edge. They were in a stalemate. Nongzhu said to Bai Changchun, "Yu Qianqiu killed Bing Chengzi's disciple. This old guy is famous for protecting his disciples. Should we tell them that Yu Qianqiu is your disciple? There's no need. Let this junior solve his own problems with his own ability. I can't help him for a lifetime. However, if someone who shouldn't have interfered, I won't let a single one of them get away." Bai Changchun expressed his stance through voice transmission. Nongzhu stared at Bai Changchun for a while. Her eyes flickered. No one knew what she was thinking. After a long time, he broke the stalemate and said, "Bing Chengzi, my disciple Zi is going to the cultivation world of Wuxia to gain experience. She has no right to interfere in your affairs. If she is really involved in your affairs coincidentally, then let me do it with my own ability. As long as you old guys don't interfere, I will also make my stance clear. I, Nongzhu, will not interfere with the junior's business." Bing Chengzi and the other two were startled. They didn't expect Nongzhu to say such words even with Bai Changchun's support. Wasn't this what they wanted to achieve? Baikong immediately nodded and said, "Brother Nongzhu is right. This is the junior's business. Us old guys can't interfere. Let the juniors fight with their own abilities." He looked at the other two and said, "I, Baikong, have the same stance as Brother Nongzhu. What do you two think?" Bing Chengzi and Hu Changshou's eyes flashed with joy. They had already sworn an oath. Now that Nongzhu had expressed her stance, they had nothing to worry about and could let their disciples do whatever they wanted. The two of them exchanged glances and nodded in unison. It's settled then. Looking at Nongzhu, Bai Changchun was also a little surprised. He didn't expect that Nongzhu was really willing to let his daughter suffer. It seemed that Bai Changchun's previous persuasion had stimulated Nongzhu and ruined his previous plan. Now it was really up to Yu Qianqiu and the others. Since everything has been made clear, we shall not disturb you any further. Baikong cupped his fists towards Bai Changchun and Nongzhu. The three of them did not want to stay any longer and shot into the sky. After watching them disappear, Nongzhu shook her head and said with a bitter smile, "I've given my daughter to your disciple. I hope he won't let me down." Bai Changchun was speechless. "If I knew you would agree, I wouldn't have come out." What an unnecessary move. It was not convenient for him to say this. If he did, he would be suspected of plotting against Nongzhu. Bai Changchun snorted coldly and disappeared with a swing of his sleeve. He returned to the Langxian courtyard in the blessed land of bamboo and continued drinking tea. 2 days later, Yu Qianqiu and Zi arrived at a stretch of deep mountains. On the main mountain range between the mountains, there were magnificent buildings that were connected layer by layer. This was the 10,000 demons, the number one demonic sect. Before the two of them got close, they heard Xiao Wuyuan's laughter coming from afar. "Brother Yu, you're finally here." Obviously, they were discovered by the people of the 10,000 demons as soon as they arrived at this area. 5 gray figures came together and stopped in front of the two of them. The one leading them was Xiao Wuyuan. The two of them also stopped flying. Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, "Greetings, senior." The other 4 had cold expressions. Yu Qianqiu had seen them before. They were the 4 generals of the demon clan who had been following Xiao Wuyuan for a long time. The 4 of them used to be the 4 servants of the previous sect leader. Not only were they high in cultivation, but they were also infamous. Because Xiao Wuyuan had been working outside for a long time, the previous sect leader sent the 4 of them to Xiao Wuyuan. It was probably more to protect his own disciple. "I just received news from the Cultivation Alliance. They said that Qianghua Fairy of the Moon Clan has already vouched for the two of you. Now you are also members of the Cultivation Alliance." Xiao Wuyuan laughed. Yu Qianqiu and Zi looked at each other. They didn't expect Qianghua Fairy to be so efficient. Xiao Wuyuan raised his hand and said, "Please." The few of them flew directly to the Grand Palace at the top of the mountain range. The entire palace had the aura of sky-bearing and was indeed magnificent. As soon as they landed in front of the palace, a group of people walked out of the palace. All of them looked serious and flew away, leaving only 3 old men standing in front of the palace. Xiao Wuyuan, who was originally happy, was slightly stunned. He quickly walked to a gloomy old man with white hair tied up by a black crown in the middle and asked, "Palace Master, did something happen?" So this was the famous palace master of the 10,000 demons, Buyun Shao. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he sized him up carefully. Buyun Shao nodded with a serious expression and said, "Wuyuan, I just received news that eldest brother Yan Bugui brought a group of people to the 100 Flowers Valley. They are now in a confrontation with the Cultivation Alliance. Something might happen at any time. Go with the 4 generals of the demon clan. It's best if you can persuade eldest brother not to do anything for master's sake. I'll go see master now." "Ah. Eldest brother," he sighed. Xiao Wuyuan stomped his feet and sighed. When he turned around and saw Yu Qianqiu and Zi, he realized that he almost forgot about them. He immediately turned around and said, "Palace Master, these two are Yu Qianqiu and Miss Zi." "You see," Buyun Shao glanced at the two and his gloomy face immediately changed into a smile. He cupped his hands and said, "I happen to have something to do. Sorry for the delay." Then he turned around and said to the old man next to him, "Fifth junior brother, take the 2 guests to rest. Don't neglect them. I'll go see master and come back soon." The 5th junior brother nodded and raised his hand to Yu Qianqiu and Zi. He said with a smile, "Please follow me. There's no need to trouble yourself." Yu Qianqiu bowed to Buyun Shao and said, "Palace Master Bu, Zi and I have just joined the Cultivation Alliance. Since the Cultivation Alliance is in trouble, we should do our best to help. Since Senior Qiu is going to the 100 Flowers Valley, we decided to go with Senior Qiu. He didn't want to come to the 10,000 demons in the first place. Not only did he not get any benefits, he might even be schemed against by others. If it wasn't for Xiao Wuyuan, he wouldn't have come. Now, he found an excuse to leave." Buyun Shao pondered for a moment before he nodded and said, "If that's the case, I won't force you. After this is over, I hope the 2 of you can give me face and come to my myriad demons palace again. I want to apologize for my poor hospitality this time. Palace Master, you're too kind." Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and said. At the side, Xiao Wuyuan seemed to be getting impatient. He waved his hand and yelled, "Let's go." He and the 4 generals of the Mo family shot into the sky first. Yu Qianzhou also jumped onto his flying sword and chased after them with Ze. Yu Qianzhou. Bu Yunxiao stared at the figures flying away and mumbled a few words. Then, he shot into the deep mountains. A few figures flew across the sky. Xiao Wuyuan and the other 4 gradually pulled away from Yu Qianzhou and Ze. From this, one could see the difference in cultivation between Yu Qianzhou and them. Of course, it wasn't that Ze couldn't fly faster. It was because she had been accompanying Yu Qianzhou the whole time. Brother Yu, it's an emergency. I'll be going first. Xiao Wuyuan's voice came from the sky. Then, the 5 in front sped up again. They immediately left the 2 behind further and further behind. Damn it! If you want to leave, then leave. Why are you shouting so loudly? Are you trying to bully me because I can't fly fast? Yu Qianzhou turned his head and looked at Ze. Luckily, Ze didn't care whether she was fast or slow. He slightly regretted that he didn't bring the whole flying instrument. Although it couldn't catch up to the speed of a tribulation-passing cultivator, it was at least faster than him. Moreover, with Ze controlling it, he could rest in peace. He had been flying around in the sky for the past few days and didn't really land. However, he immediately dismissed the idea. It seemed that Ze didn't know the way. It would be troublesome if she flew further and further away. Ever since Ze followed him, she would ask questions at the beginning. Now, no matter where they went, she would look around with her eyes wide open. It was as if she wanted to memorize the terrain of every place she passed. What a stupid idea. Yu Qianzhou found it funny and didn't say anything. The 2 of them flew at a moderate speed. Finally, they arrived at the 100 Flowers Valley before sunset. Yu Qianzhou took out the 100 Flowers Valley entry jade archive and brought Ze in. Then, he made an entry jade archive for Ze at the city gate. Ze held it in her hand like it was a treasure and looked at it. Then, she said to Yu Qianzhou, "Thank you." Yu Qianzhou was slightly stunned. Then, he remembered that ever since he brought her out of the purple bamboo forest in the southern sea, this was the first time she had received something that belonged to her. Thinking about how this girl had helped him earn 50 million, Yu Qianzhou felt a little guilty. He decided that tonight, he wouldn't care about anything else. He would be extravagant just for this girl. He couldn't let the horse run away without feeding it grass, could he? As soon as they arrived at the 100 Flowers Valley, many people immediately recognized Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou didn't care. He brought Ze straight to the best restaurant in the area, the 100 Flowers House. After entering, he knocked on the counter and said, "Give me the best private room with a view to the night view of the 100 Flowers Valley. Give me the best dishes and wine." The innkeeper was obviously a newcomer. He didn't know who Yu Qianzhou was. After looking at the ordinary clothes Yu Qianzhou was wearing, he smiled and said, "The best private room we have here, plus the best dishes and wine, will cost at least 1,000 high-grade spirit stones. Are you sure you want it? 1,000 high-grade spirit stones?" Ziyi's eyes widened. She quickly tugged at Yu Qianzhou and said, "That much? Let's find a cheaper room." Yu Qianzhou wasn't afraid of people being mean to him. He could be even meaner than them. However, he couldn't stand people being nice to him. After hearing Ziyi's words, Yu Qianzhou immediately turned around and slammed his palm on the counter. With a bang sound, he directly collapsed the counter. He shouted in a deep voice, "Are you afraid that I can't afford it?" Ziyi was stunned. She didn't know why he was so angry. The innkeeper saw that the counter had been destroyed. Wasn't this causing trouble? His face immediately darkened. He said sternly, "What are you trying to do?" Someone actually dared to cause trouble at the 100 Flowers house in the 100 Flowers Valley. There were many people inside and outside the store who came to watch the show. Chapter 385. Isn't that Yu Qianqiu? So it's that madman. No wonder. Hearing that, Yu Qianqiu, who was already in a bad mood, immediately took out a big black machete from his storage bag. Wherever the blade pointed, everyone retreated. Who's tired of living? Why don't you say a few words for me? I'll make sure you're satisfied. Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly with the machete in hand. No one said anything. Sure enough, the bigger the machete, the more intimidating it was. There was an old man in the store who recognized Yu Qianqiu. He quickly whispered a few words into the manager's ear. However, it seemed like the manager had already heard everyone's words, especially that rather unique machete, which was unique in the cultivation world. It was hard not to know who the person in front of him was. Yu Qianqiu turned the machete around and pointed it at the manager. The manager's expression changed. He immediately smiled and said, "So it's Mr. Yu. It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. If you have any orders, just tell me. As long as I can do it, I'll do my best." The manager had no choice but to admit defeat. This guy was famous for being a madman in the cultivation world. Was there anyone he didn't dare to hit? No. Was there anyone he didn't dare to kill? No. Even the dignified sect master on Kwangsung was killed by him, but he was still alive and kicking here. So what if he broke a counter? What was the point of a small manager's face? The blade of that big black machete was just a little bit away from pointing at the manager's head. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said, "You're a snob. If you don't want me to tear down the 100 Flowers residence, hurry up and prepare a private room." Yu Qianqiu knew how to play this game. Some people weren't afraid of good people, but they were afraid of hooligans. Since his reputation wasn't good, he might as well be unreasonable. The onlookers at the side were convinced. This guy was an out-and-out madman. He came all the way to the 100 Flowers Valley to tear down the 100 Flowers Palace. There would probably be a good show to watch. It was Ziyi's first time seeing such a bandit side of Yu Qianqiu. She was really a little surprised. No need to prepare, no need to prepare. There's an empty private room upstairs. Follow me. The manager carefully moved away from the machete and led the way upstairs. Before Yu Qianqiu went up the stairs, he coldly swept his eyes over the crowd. They all acted as if they didn't care about him and dispersed. But after they left, they gathered at a place not far from the 100 Flowers house and waited, ready to watch the show. Sure enough, as soon as Yu Qianqiu went upstairs, an attendant immediately ran out of the store and flew towards the Flower Palace. Everyone's eyes lit up, and they continued to wait. Zhang Gui led the two of them to the private room on the top floor and asked them to wait for a moment before he turned and ran down the stairs. The manager here elegant and elegance 8AA there's AAA there. TAAA restaurant. AAAA, you. ZE asked curiously, is this really a restaurant? What an idiotic question. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. He walked to the window and pushed it open. A cool breeze blew in. It was mixed with the fragrance of the 100 Flowers Valley's flowers. ZE also came after smelling the fragrance. The two of them stood at the window, the sun had just set. A patch of burning clouds dyed the sky red. The mountains were hazy under the twilight. Tired birds flew across the sky and returned to the forest. Downstairs was the market of the 100 Flowers Valley. Although it was already night, it was still bustling with activity. The commoners in the cultivation world lit up their fluorescent stones. They didn't want to give up the chance to earn spirit stones at night. All of this was new to ZE, who stayed in the South Sea purple bamboo forest for a long time. She couldn't get enough of it. She pointed at those people and asked, "What are they doing?" "They're making money like us, of course," Yu Qianqiu replied. "Can we make money like that?" ZE asked doubtfully. Then she nodded and said, "Then let's not leave here." We'll make money here first. It's a waste of time to run around all day. We don't know when we'll be able to complete Senior Bai's trust. Yu Qianzhou turned to look at her. It was the first time he found this one-track-minded girl so cute. He smiled and said, they want to live a peaceful life. So they're making a small amount of money. But we're making a lot of money. If you follow me, you won't have to make these small amounts of money. Baihua Fairy and her daughter Yan Zixia of Baihua Palace were worried about Yan Bugui and his men. Although they were stopped by the people from the Cultivation Alliance, and Qiu Wuyuan and the others who came in time to persuade them to leave, Yan Bugui kept saying that he would come every day until the mother and daughter agreed to meet him. The mother and daughter were really tired. But before the first wave subsided, another wave arose. A disciple of Baihua Palace quickly came and reported, Palace Master, someone from Baihua Palace reported that Yu Qianzhou just caused trouble at Baihua Palace. He even broke the counter. How should we deal with him? Yu Qianzhou? Baihua Fairy was a little surprised and asked, the one who held the blade drawing ceremony, Yu Qianzhou? The disciple bowed and said, it should be him. Someone reported that he even took out that blade to scare everyone. He's very shameless, so it can't be anyone else but him. The mother and daughter exchanged glances. Just a few days ago, they received a message from Ma Jiugu, saying that if they ever run into any trouble in the future, they can look for Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou wouldn't shirk their responsibility and would have a way to solve it for them. The mother and daughter were still confused by this. Although Yu Qianzhou was quite famous in the cultivation world, what problem could he possibly help them solve? But Ma Jiugu wasn't one to speak carelessly. Now, before they even looked for him to solve their problem, he's already causing trouble. I'll go take a look, Yan Zixia said. As she was about to leave, her mother called out, Zixia, it's best if you don't go out. If you run into your father, you'll be in trouble again. Baihua Fairy waved her hand at the disciple and said, leave. Don't look into Yu Qianzhou's matter, all of his expenses at Baihua Palace will be free. The disciple was a bit surprised, but still followed her words and left. Yan Zixia's eyes flickered as she looked outside the palace, not knowing what she was thinking. After enjoying the scenery for a while, Yu Qianzhou still didn't see any food being served. Just as he was feeling strange, he suddenly noticed that many people downstairs were looking at them as if they were watching a show. Yu Qianzhou's expression suddenly changed. This shopkeeper was clearly stalling for time. He might have gone to Baihua Palace to look for reinforcements. He slammed his palm on the windowsill and said in a low voice, do you really think I don't dare to burn down Baihua Palace? Zi, who was admiring the scenery outside, was surprised, not knowing why he suddenly got angry. At this time, the shopkeeper's voice came from outside, Mister, don't worry, the food is here. As soon as the shopkeeper came in, a few waiters came in with trays of food and wine, quickly arranging them on the table. Yu Qianzhou stared at him and asked, why are you so late? Do you want to do something? Mister, you misunderstand. The shopkeeper bowed with a smile, we just received an order from the palace lord. The palace lord said to treat you well, and all the expenses of Baihua Palace will be waived. You see, since the palace lord has already given the order, we naturally don't dare to delay, so the preparation time is a bit long. For this shopkeeper to be sent to be the shopkeeper of Baihua Palace, he wasn't completely useless, he was quite good with words. When Yu Qianzhou heard about the palace lord of Baihua Palace, he immediately remembered Ma Jiugu's request. It would be a bit too much if he continued to make trouble. Seeing that the food and wine were already served, he waved his hand, all of you can leave. Thank the palace lord for her kindness, I will thank her in person if there's a chance. Okay, enjoy. The shopkeeper nodded and bowed, then led the waiters away. Yu Qianzhou walked around the table full of food and wine, and found that the dishes were exquisite. As expected, he waved his hand at Zi, who was looking at him, eat. He took the lead to sit down, and opened his mouth to eat. It would be a waste not to eat something that didn't cost money. Shopkeeper just said that it's free, does it cost money? Ze sat down and asked. With food in his mouth, Yu Qianqiu nodded repeatedly, it's free, eat as much as you want, otherwise, it will be a waste. Hearing that it really didn't cost money, Ziyi's eyes lit up, and she immediately didn't stand on ceremony. This was what she learned from Yu Qianqiu. Don't be polite when you shouldn't be, otherwise, you would be letting yourself down. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Yu Qianqiu burped, and when he saw Ziyi stop, he was stunned. Only now did he remember something. It seemed that every time he ate, as long as he was still eating, this girl would also not stop, but as soon as he stopped, she would immediately stop eating. It seemed like this girl's appetite wasn't small. She could even keep up with his trip. Yu Qianqiu was happy. He originally wanted to be extravagant for this girl, but he didn't expect that the food and wine would be free, then he would make up for it in other ways. He stood up and smiled, let's go, I'll bring you out for a walk. Ze nodded repeatedly, and stood up as well. She loved to walk around, but it was a pity that during this period of time, she had been flying non-stop in the sky. When the two of them went downstairs, they realized that the broken counter had been replaced with a new one. It was indeed fast. Yu Qianqiu walked over and knocked on the counter, and said, shopkeeper, reserve 2 good rooms for me, I might have to stay here for a period of time. All right. The shopkeeper hurriedly agreed. This guy couldn't be provoked, even the higher-ups didn't pursue the matter, what else could he say? After the two of them walked out of the 100-flower pavilion, the shopkeepers of the 4 noble clans, who had been waiting outside for a long time, immediately came over to greet them. Yu Qianqiu had a pleasant expression as he politely persuaded the 4 of them to return and continued strolling around with Ze. The people who were originally prepared to watch the show immediately dispersed in disappointment. They didn't expect that the 100 Flowers Palace actually didn't cause trouble for Yu Qianqiu, and looking at how the shopkeepers of the 4 major families treated Yu Qianqiu, it seemed like the rumor that the 4 major families and Yu Qianqiu were on the same side was indeed true. The prosperity of the shop market was quite tempting to Ze. Seeing every novel thing, she couldn't help but stop to take a look and touch it. She was a little reluctant to let go. Yu Qianqiu was prepared to spend money tonight, so he directly said to the shopkeeper, I'll buy it. How much? 10 mid-grade spirit stones. The shopkeeper replied. Isn't the price a little high? Yu Qianqiu frowned. Mr. Yu, look at what you're saying, I'd fool anyone but you. The shopkeeper thought to himself, you even dared to smash the 100 Flowers house, how would my small stall dare to provoke you? There was no more nonsense. Yu Qianqiu also wouldn't bother with these small shop owners, he directly paid and took the things. So on and so forth, almost every stall had similar conversations. Ze stopped halfway and asked suspiciously, why does everyone here seem to know you? Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. He refused to answer this question. He directed Ziyi's thoughts back to shopping. He followed behind her, holding a storage bag in his hand. As long as Ze stopped to look at or touch something, he could only do 3 things: ask for the price, pay, and pack the things. It seemed like women were born to be shopaholics, especially when there was a man who was willing to pay with money following them. After shopping at the stalls, the spirit stones were spent like flowing water. The things in the shops were much more expensive than the things in the stalls. Some of them easily cost hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of high-grade spirit stones. Ze didn't care whether she could use it or not. As long as she liked it, she would subconsciously nod at Yu Qianqiu. She didn't think about how much it cost. Anyway, someone was paying. Yu Qianqiu himself also couldn't remember how many types of things he sold, regardless of the size of the items. In any case, he bought almost everything in the stalls and shops. He even filled up 2 storage bags. It was already late at night. There was no more shopping. Ze just remembered that she seemed to have bought a lot of things. She looked at Yu Qianqiu embarrassedly and asked weakly, it seems like you spent a lot of money. Sigh. Isn't it a little too late to ask this now? Yu Qianzhou's gaze had already answered her question. Ze became even more embarrassed. She said embarrassedly, I really didn't mean it. I know you didn't mean it. Yu Qianzhou handed over the 3 storage bags and smiled. Actually, I didn't buy much, I just filled up these 3 storage bags. Ze received the 3 storage bags and used her divine sense to look at them. She was shocked. She didn't expect to buy so many things just by casually strolling around. Carrying the 3 storage bags, she didn't know what to do. She once again weakly asked, how much did you spend in total? It's okay. Consider these things as a gift from me. You can earn more money after you spend it, as long as you are happy. Yu Qianzhou smiled. Seeing that Yu Qianzhou didn't have any intention of blaming her, Ze hugged the storage bags and nodded vigorously. I will definitely help you earn money. She happily put away the 3 storage bags. Today could be said to be a happy day. These words made Yu Qianzhou happy. He liked to hear this the most. He felt that the money spent today was worth it. Just as he was about to bring Ze back to 100 Flowers House to rest, he suddenly saw an old acquaintance from supporting Immortal Island, Xiong Hui, walking towards him. This fellow used to eat and drink with him in the past, so Xiong Hui couldn't help but nod and smile. Long time no see, how have you been? Ze looked at him curiously. He really had a lot of acquaintances. Xiong Hui had hung out with him for a few days. They could be considered old friends. He wasn't like the others. He cupped his fists and said happily, no matter how good I am, I can't compare to you. I heard that you came to 100 Flowers House and caused a ruckus the moment you arrived. You didn't come here just to ask about this, did you? Yu Qianzhou asked. Xiong Hui shook his head and said with a serious expression, just now, the Cultivation Alliance received a challenge Jade Archive sent by Yan Bugui. All the sects in the Cultivation Alliance have received the notice. Elder Quan asked us to inform the other individual cultivators who have already joined the Cultivation Alliance and are in the 100 Flowers Valley to meet at the Cultivation Alliance tomorrow to discuss this matter. I just heard that you are here. The leader of the Moon Clan has already vouched for you. You are now also a member of the Cultivation Alliance. Because we are familiar with each other, I specially came to find you to inform you of this matter. Yan Bugui is challenging the Cultivation Alliance? Yu Qianzhou frowned and asked again to confirm, are you going to meet at the Cultivation Alliance tomorrow? Yes. You. Brother Yu, I won't say any more, I still have to inform the others, we can talk about this later. Xiong Hui cupped his fists and left. What does challenging the Cultivation Alliance have to do with me? Yu Qianzhou muttered softly, turned his head and said to Ze, go back and rest. After that, he led Ze, who was like an obedient child, back to 100 Flowers House. Chapter 386. The next day, the sun had already risen high in the sky, but Yu Qianzhou was still sleeping soundly on the bed. He had been flying non-stop for the past few days, and he was indeed a little tired. Normal cultivators would probably meditate to recover, but he preferred the most primitive way of resting, sleeping. Lying on the bed with his legs spread out was also a kind of happiness. Dong, dong, dong. In his dream, he was still in his previous life, and he was discussing physiological problems with a few blonde and blue-eyed ladies. Unfortunately, he was awakened by a series of knocks on the door. He got up and looked around, and he couldn't help but sigh slightly. As expected, he was dreaming. The era of 4 wheels was gone forever. Dong, dong, dong. The knocks on the door continued, and Yu Qianzhou immediately shouted, who is it? Who is it? Why are you knocking on the door so early in the morning? Don't you know that you're sleeping? He got off the bed unhappily and got up to retract all the black fiend traps that he had set up around him into his body. He had no choice but to do this. Often, people who schemed against others were also afraid of being schemed against by others. Back then, he had schemed against Lu Zhengguang here. Now that he was living here, he was also worried that he would be schemed against by others. After all, he had offended too many people. He had originally wanted to retreat to Utopia to rest, but he was a little worried about leaving Ze, who was as innocent as a piece of white paper, here. Although Ze's cultivation was much higher than his, he was still a little worried. Speaking of which, he didn't know who was protecting who. He walked to the door and pulled it open. Just as he was about to curse, he saw Ze standing outside the door with her hands behind her back. She had an obedient expression, and there was a hint of a fawning expression on her face. This was unprecedented. Needless to say, she was the one who knocked on the door. Yu Qianzhou swallowed back his curses and asked suspiciously, "Why are you knocking on my doors so early in the morning?" "It's not early. It's already noon. Didn't someone ask you to go to the Cultivation Alliance last night?" Ze asked. Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes, turned around, and went back to his room. As he walked, he said, "In their eyes, we're just two lousy loose cultivators. Why are we involved in that? They have their meeting, and we just have to take care of ourselves." He walked to the side of the bed, tilted his body, and fell back down. In fact, he really wanted to get involved. In his words, the more people there were, the more opportunities there were to get rich. But when he thought that Yen Bugue had brought a group of people and had a grudge against him, he decided that it was better to avoid the brunt of the conflict. He did not want to be the one who challenged the Cultivation Alliance. That would not be pleasant. Ze entered the room and said, "But there are people from the 4 great clans waiting for you downstairs. They say they want to wait for you to go with them." "The 4 great families." "Huh?" Yu Qianzhou crawled up and asked, "How did you know? You went down alone?" Ze stuttered and said, "Didn't you say it's a waste not to eat something that doesn't cost money? I think the food in this restaurant is quite delicious, so I went down to order some food by myself. It just so happens that the people from the 4 major families are waiting for you downstairs. I'll help them ask you after I finish eating. Wouldn't it be a waste not to eat it?" Yu Qianzhou was startled. It seemed that he really did say that to her. She had a strong learning ability. He couldn't sleep anymore. He used the water spell, and a stream of clear water came out of Yu Qianzhou's palm. One stream went into his mouth to clean, and the rest was used to wash his face. After washing, the turbid water gathered into a ball. Yu Qianzhou opened the window, waved his hand, and the water turned into an arrow and shot out. As for where it would land, he was too lazy to think about it. In the end, Ze was completely dumbfounded. There was no one downstairs. They were probably all at the Cultivation Alliance. The 4 great clans sent 8 people. The 4 elders were Bai Shan, Tan Huazong, Jing Xingping, and Wu Anfeng. The 4 of them were at the middle stage of tribulation passing. Except for the elder from the Wu clan who looked familiar, Yu Qianzhou did not know any of them. The remaining 4 people were old acquaintances. They were the first successors of the 4 great clans, Bai Zizong and the other 3. When the 8 of them saw Yu Qianzhou, they all bowed and said, "Mr. Yu. No need to be so polite, no need to be so polite." Yu Qianzhou smiled and waved his hand. He turned around and said to Ze, "Go, get me the food you had this morning." Ze didn't say anything and went straight to the counter to order. The shopkeeper smiled and nodded, but his smile seemed a little unnatural. "Brother Bai, you guys are here too?" As soon as Yu Qianzhou said this, Bai Zizong and the other 3 quickly said, "We don't dare." Now that the seniority between them was different from before, the 4 of them didn't dare to call him brother anymore. Moreover, there were 4 elders beside him. It wasn't the right time to talk about this in front of everyone. Yu Qianzhou looked at the 4 of them and asked, "What do you want from me?" The 4 elders looked at each other and nodded. Bai Shan, the elder of the Bai clan, stood up and replied, "After the 4 great clans received the Cultivation Alliance's notice, they sent us here overnight. We learned that Sir is in the 100 Flowers Valley and has joined the Cultivation Alliance. Before we left, the elders of the 4 great clans told us that if Sir needs any help, we should do our best to cooperate. Yu Qianzhou smiled noncommittally. The waiter of the 100 Flowers house had already served the food. He asked casually, "Do you want to eat together?" Seeing that they shook their heads, he didn't hold back and buried his head in the food. He didn't say anything, and no one knew what he was thinking. The 8 of them were a little speechless. They heard about him smashing the 100 Flowers house as soon as they arrived, and they still ate and lived here. They didn't hear about the people of the 100 Flowers palace doing anything to him. After eating, Yu Qianzhou patted his stomach, looking very comfortable. Bai Zizong had stayed with him before and knew that he liked to take advantage of others. He immediately went to pay for him, but the shopkeeper didn't accept it. He said that Yu Qianzhou's expenses in the 100 Flowers house were all free, which surprised the 8 of them. Smashing the place and living for free? Was there such a good thing in the world? I heard that the Cultivation Alliance is discussing something. Aren't you 4 great clans going? Yu Qianzhou asked leisurely. Sir, didn't you join the Cultivation Alliance? Didn't you receive the notice? Bai Shan asked curiously. It wasn't hard to guess what he meant. We came here to make our stand and wait for you to go together. Of course, Yu Qianzhou also heard it. He paused and said, "Someone did inform me, but I was busy with something important just now, so I was delayed." Then, sir, are you done with what you have on hand? If you're free, let's go together, Bai Shan said politely. Yu Qianzhou wanted to say that he wasn't done, but he happened to meet Ziyi's strange gaze. He couldn't help but feel guilty. Thinking about it, he felt that it wasn't good. If he kept hiding here, he had to go out and get some information. How could he get rich hiding in his room? Moreover, a whole morning had passed. The Cultivation Alliance's discussion was probably almost done. It was the right time to show his face and ask for information. Alright, then let's go together. Yu Qianzhou laughed. There were exactly 10 people in the group. As soon as they left the 100 Flowers house, they started pushing each other. The 4 great clans insisted that Yu Qianzhou and Ziyi walk in front. However, Yu Qianzhou didn't want to show off at this time, so he insisted on hiding at the back. In the end, the 4 great clans couldn't persuade him, so they let him and Ziyi follow behind. It didn't take long for the group to reach the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance. At this time, there were already a lot of people around. They were all people who didn't have the right to enter. Seeing that the 4 great clans had arrived, someone immediately jeered, "The 4 great clans are so arrogant. Coming at this time, they really don't care about the sects." With one person taking the lead, there were others who had nothing to do and followed suit. The 4 great clans suddenly became the center of attention. Although the 4 great clans weren't happy, they wouldn't argue with these people in public. Moreover, they really came too late, so they could only look at them coldly. The jeering people took advantage of the number of people and saw that the 4 great clans didn't react, so they were very cocky. Damn it! A bunch of hooligans, purposely making me show off. Yu Qianzhou's mouth twitched. The 4 great clans became the center of attention. He couldn't keep a low profile even if he wanted to hide at the back. Many people realized that the person behind the 4 great clans was Yu Qianzhou, so they all remained silent. However, there were those who were dumb, stupid, and loud. When Yu Qianzhou showed himself, there was a person next to him who was grinning and almost spitting on Yu Qianzhou's face. Bang! A fist smashed heavily on that person's face, and blood and broken teeth flew out. Crack! A foot kicked from the side of that person's calf. The sound of the leg bone breaking was so crisp, and the whole leg was directly broken. Ah! That person fell to the ground and let out a scream. B***TCH. Yu Qianzhou finally couldn't help but make a move and scolded. After some people next to that person saw who it was, they all subconsciously took a step back, just enough time for that person to hug his leg and lie on the ground, howling and rolling. At this time, the surrounding people realized that the person who had just punched and kicked was Yu Qianzhou, and suddenly quieted down. The people from the 4 great clans looked back and were shocked. They didn't expect that Yu Qianzhou would actually make a move at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance. However, the effect of this punch and kick was quite good, and the annoying noise was finally gone. The crowd in front immediately made way for them. Yu Qianzhou acted like nothing had happened, and followed behind the 4 great clans. After proving his identity at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance, they walked in together. On the flat ground of the Cultivation Alliance, hundreds of people sat cross-legged in a few circles. In the middle were the representatives of the top 10 sects of the righteous and demonic sections. At this time, they were all looking outside. Everyone first heard many people talking about the 4 great clans, and then heard the screams outside. They didn't know what was going on. All the sects were suspicious. Could it be that the people from the 4 great clans made a move at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance? At this time, the people from the 4 great clans walked in, and all the sects became more and more suspicious. What the hell are you screaming for? 2 of you go and see what exactly is going on. Xiao Wuyuan didn't know what was going on, and he shouted with a bad expression. 2 of the 10,000 demons immediately dashed out. There were many praying mats outside the venue, and the 10 of them each took one and sat at the outermost area. Although Yu Qianzhou wanted to be as low-key as possible, Ziyi's purple clothes were too eye-catching. Once everyone saw Ziyi, their eyes immediately searched for him. Xiao Wuyuan looked outside, and then looked at Yu Qianzhou with a face full of suspicion. At this time, 2 disciples of the 10,000 demons came back and reported to him, Elder Qiu, a disciple of the 6-path demon sect was beaten outside, but no one saw clearly who did it. The person who was beaten didn't see clearly either. The 2 of them were very depressed. The person who was beaten said that he was ambushed, and he didn't see clearly, but the others all stuttered and said that they didn't see clearly. Yu Qianzhou was even more stunned. There was such a good thing? A figure in the crowd jumped into the air and flipped out of the courtyard. After a while, that person came back in a flash and stood at the periphery, staring angrily at the people from the 4 great clans. He shouted, "Who dares to hurt my disciple? Quickly come out and admit your guilt." Chapter 387. The Hexapath Devil sect was ranked 4th in the demonic Tao, just below the Corpse sect. The one who roared at the 4 major families was the chief representative of the Hexapath Devil sect, Yuan Jiokue. He was an outstanding figure in the demonic Tao, famous for his violent temper and battle prowess. Although the overall strength of the Hexapath Devil sect wasn't as strong as the other top-ranked sects, Yuan Jiokue's personal strength wasn't any weaker than the other sections. "Who injured my disciple? Come out and accept your punishment." Yuan Jiokue roared once more. When he heard that his disciple was beaten up, he immediately ran out to investigate. Although the disciple didn't see who did it, he said that it was someone from the 4 major families, so he was sure that it was someone from the 4 major families who did it. How could they accept that their disciple was beaten up when all the sects were gathered here? Furthermore, the Hexapath Devil sect had no reason to be afraid of the 4 major families, so they naturally had to get back their face. The expressions of the people from the 4 great clans changed. This was clearly against the 4 great clans. As a direct descendant of Bai Changchun, Bai Shan naturally could not let Yu Qianzhou come out to accept his punishment. Just as he was about to stand up and fight back, he was stopped by Yu Qianzhou who was behind him. Yu Qianzhou slowly stood up. He was still happy when he heard that no one saw who did it, so he wanted to maintain his silence. However, the other party had already pointed at the noses of the 4 major families. If it was any other sect, he would definitely continue to pretend that he didn't know anything. However, the 4 major families were related to him, and they would be of great help to him in the future. He didn't want to disappoint them. I was the one who did it. Yu Qianzhou admitted it. Everyone had expected this. They were all puzzled. The four major families had always been neutral, and they never had any conflicts with any sections. So why would they attack someone at this moment? It was Yu Qianzhou, that madman. That made sense. It's you? Yuan Jiukui was slightly startled. Then, anger rose in his heart. He pointed his finger and shouted, Yu Qianzhou, don't you dare run amok in the cultivation world just because you're a bandit. Others give you some face, but you really think you're something? I, Yuan Jiukui, have never put a clown like you in my eyes. How dare a scoundrel like you mess around in front of my Six Paths demon sect? Elder brother Yuan, don't be angry, don't be angry. Xiao Wuyuan flashed over, pulled Yuan Jiukui, and comforted him. Xiao Wuyuan, get out of my way. Yuan Jiukui swung his arm, turned around, pointed at Xiao Wuyuan's nose, and scolded, I've always heard that you and this scoundrel are brothers. It's because of people like you that this scoundrel can run amok in the cultivation world. Don't call me elder brother in the future, or it will dirty my ears. Scram. Yuan Jiukui's words could be said to have hit the hearts of the people present. Although Yu Qianzhou was happy in the cultivation world, the sects that had been in the cultivation world for many years didn't really look up to Yu Qianzhou. If it wasn't for the ambiguous attitude of Fuxian Island and 10,000 demons towards Yu Qianzhou, someone would have already made a move on Yu Qianzhou. Not to mention that Yu Qianzhou had the support of the four major families. Yuan Jiukui's words were like a wake-up call to Yu Qianzhou. When he looked at the people in charge of the other sects, almost all of them looked down on him. Clearly, they all agreed with Yuan Jiukui's words. Yu Qianzhou immediately understood his position in the cultivation world. When he suddenly attacked someone at the entrance earlier, he subconsciously thought that he was afraid of anyone because he was a scoundrel. He thought he was impressive, but in the eyes of the people with a certain level of status in the large sects, they did not look up to him at all. He could only scare those little disciples who didn't have much of a cultivation base. How dare you! Just when Yuan Jiukui told Xiao Wuyuan to piss off, four bellows rang out. The four generals of the Mo family in black furs arrived with a flash and surrounded Yuan Jiukui. Yuan Jiukui glanced around and snorted coldly. 9 people immediately shot out from the crowd and surrounded the 4 generals of the Mo family. They were clearly from the Hexapath demon sect. When I was dominating the world, the 4 of you were still slaves to Yen Wuchen, yet you dare to yell at me now? Are you trying to rebel? Yuan Jiukui sneered. Then he waved his hand at the 9 people from the Hexapath demon sect and called out, leave. I'd like to see just what the 4 generals of the 10,000 demons are capable of. The domineering nature of a demonic cultivator was completely revealed in just a few words. Everyone was slightly speechless. It seemed like Yuan Jiukui wanted to deal with the 4 generals of the Mo family alone. The people from the Hexapath demon sect did not say anything else and backed down. After being called slaves, the 4 generals of the Mo family remained cold. They were not angered at all, but they began to radiate with pressing killing intent. Xiao Wuyuan was not a good-tempered person either, but his expression immediately returned to normal. He immediately yelled out, stop messing around, all of you back off. Hearing that, the 4 generals of the Mo family immediately flashed behind him. They did not even hesitate at all. Brother Yuan, calm down. Let's talk things out. There's nothing that can't be resolved. Xiao Wuyuan was already giving face by saying something like that after being scolded. Otherwise, there was no reason for the 10,000 demons to be afraid of Yuan Jiukui with their status in the demonic sections. That's right. Now that we're facing a great enemy, let's just bear with it for now. When Zhongping from the Blood Demon Palace originally wanted to watch the show between the 10,000 demons, but seeing that Xiao Wuyuan had given in, he knew that he couldn't watch it anymore, so he stood up and said something nice. After all, the righteous sects wanted to watch the show between the demonic sects more than him. The demonic sects could watch it, but the righteous sects could not. When Ze saw that Yu Qianchou was in a daze after being scolded, her pretty face immediately turned cold. Senior Bai's disciple was not someone that could be scolded. She stood up and slowly walked towards Yuan Jiukui. The whole place instantly became incomparably quiet. Yuan Jiukui vigilantly looked back, and his pupils shrank. He immediately turned around and got into a fighting stance. He could look down on Yu Qianchou, but he didn't dare to look down on Ze. This mysterious woman had fought against 7 experts in the final phase of tribulation passing. He knew that he was no match for her, but he couldn't lose the reputation of the hexapath demon sect. Xiao Wuyuan and Wen Zhongping looked at each other. This woman was not an ordinary person. Her background was mysterious, and they didn't know what her temper was like. The two of them didn't know what to do. Yuan Jiukui stared at Yu Qianchou and sneered, "A scoundrel is a scoundrel. He actually needs a woman to stand up for him." Yuan Jiukui, watch your mouth. What's wrong with a woman? A woman's voice sounded. In the field, 10 disciples in white from the Moon Clan stood up. The leading woman flashed over. It was Hua Yinue, the elder of the Moon Clan. Hua Yinue had already received a message from Jade Flower Fairy, asking her to protect Yu Qianchou and Ze to the best of her ability. Yuan Jiukui's words just now finally gave her an excuse. The righteous people were all stunned. How come things were getting more and more complicated? Originally, they only wanted to see the diabolism become a joke, but now even the righteous people were involved. In a second, everyone understood. Yu Qianchou and Ze had joined the Cultivation Alliance with the Moon Clan as their guarantor. The Moon Clan was using this as a pretext to make a fuss. The Fuxian Island and the Moon Clan had always been on good terms. Quan Deming also couldn't sit still. He flashed between the two groups and comforted, "Everyone, let's talk this out. Don't be impulsive. The matter of Yan Bugui's challenge hasn't been decided yet. If we start fighting among ourselves, we'll become a laughing stock." Being blocked by a group of women, Yuan Jiukui himself was also stunned. "Ze, come back." Yu Qianchou's voice attracted everyone's attention. He walked forward and bowed deeply to Yuan Jiukui. "Senior Yuan, please calm down. I was too impulsive just now. Please forgive me." He had thought it through. He had to lower his head when it was necessary. Otherwise, it would be hard for him to integrate into this circle. If he didn't integrate into this circle, it would be hard for him to find a chance to make a fortune. He had to bear with it even if he felt uncomfortable. When his strength matured, he would be able to deal with anyone he wanted. When the various sects heard his words, they immediately felt that it was strange. This madman had always been unforgiving when he had the upper hand. Currently, with the appearance of Ze and the others, it was clear that he had already gained the upper hand. Yet, he still ran out to apologize with such a sincere attitude. It was truly surprising. Xiao Wuyuan stared at Yu Qianchou with sparkling eyes. He wondered if he had seen wrongly. Although Yuan Jiukui's attitude was commendable, he had crippled a disciple of the Six Paths Devil sect. Naturally, Yuan Jiukui wouldn't let this matter rest just because of an apology. Yuan Jiukui glared at Lin Yun and said, "Are you trying to let this matter go with just a sentence? May I know what this junior should do to appease senior?" Yu Qianchou asked respectfully. Yuan Jiukui's gaze slowly shifted to Lin Yun's leg. He said in a solemn voice, "I won't say anything else. You broke the left leg of my disciple. If you can break your own leg, this old man will be able to answer to the sect when I return. This old man can also guarantee that the Six Paths Devil sect will treat this matter as if it never happened." The people of the 4 major clans also stood behind Yu Qianchou when they heard this. They glared at Yuan Jiukui. The legs of a little disciple with low cultivation actually wanted to trade for the legs of their old ancestors' direct disciple. If they allowed this to happen, they wouldn't be able to return to the four major clans anymore. Ze looked at Yu Qianzhou with an expressionless face. As long as he gave the signal, she would immediately make a move. The other sects also felt that Yuan Jiuque's condition was a bit too harsh. They suspected that he didn't know how to appreciate favors. Sure enough, Yu Qianzhou's expression sank in an instant. He rubbed his nose as he looked at the crowd and sneered, "It's not difficult for me to break one of my legs, but I have something to ask all of you. Although the four great clans and I arrived a bit late, it's fine if everyone provoked and insulted us at the entrance. After all, we were the ones who were rude first." He suddenly turned around and pointed at Yuan Jiuque. He shouted, "But what gives a disciple of the Six Paths Devil sect the right to spit on my face in public? If I spit on your face, will you attack me? I'm afraid you'll even have the heart to kill me, right? There's such a thing? Then he's really asking for a beating." Everyone immediately whispered in each other's ears. Everyone had indeed heard the commotion outside, provoking and insulting the four clans. In such a chaotic situation, there was no guarantee that some naughty disciples would spit on the four clans. Yuan Jiuque was startled when he heard that. How did the Six Paths Devil sect become the ones who stirred up trouble first? But after thinking about it, he was afraid that it was really possible. He paused and said with some uncertainty, "That's not possible. He. I've never been afraid of anyone." Yu Qianzhou looked around and sneered, "I know that everyone has a lot of misunderstandings about me, causing my reputation in the cultivation world to be bad. But I'm not a deranged person. How could I randomly grab someone and beat them? If Senior Yuan doesn't believe me, why don't you summon the disciple who was beaten? I can confront him directly. Who is right and who is wrong will naturally be clear." Chapter 388. Yuan Jiuque's expression became gloomy. He wasn't completely clueless about that disciple, and he knew that the disciple wasn't very virtuous. But now, as Yu Qianzhou had said, he wanted to interrogate the disciple and find out that his side was in the wrong first. If that happened, wouldn't he become a laughingstock? Most importantly, he thought that he was in the right, and offended several groups of people. He even threw away the face of the Devil Path's leader, the 10,000 demons. If the truth came out, and it was disadvantageous to his side, he would be embarrassed. While he was hesitating, many people could see his apprehension. Qiu Wuyuan winked at Wen Zhongping and pulled Yuan Jiuque with a smile, "Old brother Yuan, for my sake, this matter ends here. Don't pursue it anymore. I'll send someone to treat that disciple's injury, and I'll definitely return him a healthy leg." "That's right. Old brother Yuan, personal grudges are a small matter, but take the big picture into consideration." Wen Zhongping also persuaded. Yuan Jiuque naturally understood that these two demonic cultivators were taking the opportunity to give him a way out. If he didn't appreciate it, then he wouldn't know how to appreciate a favor. But he didn't know if Yu Qianzhou would fight to the bitter end. This guy was famous for being merciless. Yuan Jiuque looked at Yu Qianzhou. Qiu Wuyuan understood his meaning, so he walked over to Yu Qianzhou with a smile, patted his shoulder, and said, "Old brother Yu, give this old brother some face, and forget it. How about we end this matter here? Since Senior Qiu has spoken, we can swallow this small grievance." Yu Qianzhou also looked at Yuan Jiuque and said, "I wonder if Senior Yuan still wants to pursue this matter?" Humph. Yuan Jiuque snorted heavily, then flashed back to his original position and sat down cross-legged. His attitude was obvious, indicating that he wouldn't pursue this matter any further. "What are you snorting about? Let's see if you still dare to snort when this father destroys your Six Paths demon sect one day." Yu Qianzhou's brows twitched. "It's better if this father doesn't pursue this matter, then I won't waste my breath." He also turned around and returned to his seat. It's all right, it's all right. Everyone, return to your positions. Xiao Wuyuan waved his hand at the crowd and smiled. The group of people returned to their positions, and this matter was over for the time being. Ze was still feeling quite indignant. She looked at Yu Qianqiu beside her and wondered what had happened to him. Yesterday, he had smashed someone's counter because of a single sentence, and today, he was scolded in the nose and endured it. Yu Qianqiu had already put this matter aside for the time being. He had thought that the discussion between the various sects had already ended, but who would have thought that it was still going on? He had no idea what had happened for it to take such a long time. He sat at the back and listened for a while before he understood. It turns out that this time, Yan Bugui brought 2 Tribulation Realm cultivators with him, as well as 50 Tribulation Realm cultivators. A total of 53 people came to Baihua Palace, intending to reunite with Baihua Fairy as husband and wife. In the end, they were obstructed by the various sects led by the supporting Immortal Island. At that time, both sides almost came to blows. It was unknown what Yan Bugui was thinking, but when he had the upper hand, he forcefully endured it. Actually, everyone understood that Yan Bugui wasn't ready to officially turn against the Chinese cultivation world yet. He was probably still waiting for the foreign cultivation world's reinforcements to arrive, and the foreign cultivation world was probably also coordinating this matter. And the Chinese cultivation world wasn't ready either. The main reason was that there were too many sects, so it was hard for them to reach a consensus. The main problem was that once a fight broke out, who would contribute how much money, how much manpower, and who would be the commander? The righteous sects didn't feel at ease handing over manpower and money to the demonic sects, and vice versa. In fact, no one felt at ease handing over their own things to others. A large-scale war wasn't just a fight between 2 people. Once a winner was decided, they would have to be prepared for a long period of time. The longer it lasted, the more spirit stones and manpower would be consumed, and that would be a huge number. Although all the sects had stored a lot of spirit stones for emergencies, no one would take out their money for no reason. Who didn't hope that they would contribute less money and manpower, while others would contribute more? After the war, the strength of the sects might be reshuffled. Everyone wanted to preserve their strength. The foreign cultivation world on Yan Bugui's side, as well as the Chinese cultivation world, were probably facing the same awkward situation, so they didn't start fighting for the time being. In short, whoever was ready first would make the first move. That was for sure. If they couldn't officially turn against each other, they could at least do something like east wind west wind, dampening the other party's morale. And so, last night, Yan Bugui suddenly sent someone to deliver a challenge Jade archive to the Cultivation Alliance. The content was very simple. Both sides would send their people to fight 20 rounds. Regardless of whether they were dead or alive, the winner would be determined by the number of wins and losses. The loser would have to pay 1 billion high-grade spirit stones to the winner. Of course, the challenge couldn't be without rules. It was impossible for one side to send an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator to fight, while the other side sent a late-stage tribulation-passing cultivator to kill the other side. That wouldn't be a challenge. It would be no different from seeking death. Yan Bugui's letter of challenge stated that either side could send their people to challenge the other side first. One person could go on stage repeatedly, but the person sent by the challenged side couldn't have a higher cultivation level than the challenger. Of course, if the challenged side was willing to send someone with a lower cultivation level to die, the opposing side naturally wouldn't have any objections. That night, the Chinese cultivation world replied, "Accept the challenge." This was something that couldn't be avoided. Whoever dared to say the word "avoid" would probably be drowned in spittle. But 1 billion high-grade spirit stones couldn't possibly be given to a single sect. When it came to apportioning the money and manpower, it would be a little difficult. Anyone could make the argument, but the key was which sect would contribute the money and manpower. Thus, after discussing for half a day, they still couldn't come up with a solution. In short, everyone had thousands of reasons, all of which were for them to contribute less. 1 billion high-grade spirit stones. When Yu Qianzhou heard this, his eyes almost emitted a green light, and he and Purple Dress looked at each other in unison. Yan Bugui came from the 10,000 demons, and now he has become the scourge of the Chinese cultivation world. For this challenge, the 10,000 demons can't absolve themselves from the blame. I'm not saying that the 10,000 demons will pay all of the 1 billion high-grade spirit stones, but the 10,000 demons still have to pay the most. Before the Luo sect's Zhu Xianxian could finish, Qiu Wuyuan jumped up and scolded, "Bullsh****. Yan Bugui has long established his own sect. He is him, and the 10,000 demons is 10,000 demons. If the Luo sect doesn't want to pay, then just say it. Don't always use this as an excuse. This is the whole Chinese cultivation world's business, not the 10,000 demons' business." Qiu Wuyuan, what you said is wrong. Why didn't someone like Yan Bugui come from other sects, but from the 10,000 demons? If it wasn't for the 10,000 demons' lack of discipline, this wouldn't have happened. I think Elder Zhu is right. The 10,000 demons should pay the most. The one who said this was the Sword Faction's Elder Duan Tianbua, who was ranked 4th in the righteous sections. That's right. That's right. A group of righteous sects echoed, and they all pointed their spears at the 10,000 demons. The expressions of the demons kept changing. Logically speaking, they should be supporting the 10,000 demons, but only the 10,000 demons could be used against them. If they had to pay more, then so be it. After all, the 10,000 demons had a lot of money, so this amount of money was nothing. Yu Qianzhou finally understood. No wonder he saw Qiu Wuyuan's face the moment he came in. He had become the target of everyone's attacks. Sigh. Yan Bugui had caused trouble, and now the 10,000 demons had become the scapegoat. It was really hard on Qiu Wuyuan, who had been running around outside. Duan Tianbua, you're not a good person either. You call yourself a righteous sect, but you're faster than anyone else when something happens. Fine. If you think that this has nothing to do with your sword faction, then please withdraw from the Cultivation Alliance. We, the 10,000 demons, will pay for your sword faction's money. Qiu Wuyuan pointed at Duan Tianbua's nose and scolded him. Then, he looked around at the crowd and patted his chest loudly. If the righteous sects think that this has nothing to do with you, you can all withdraw from the Cultivation Alliance. We, the 10,000 demons, will pay for the righteous sects' money. A bunch of shameless people who call themselves righteous sects, tui. Qiu Wuyuan argued with the crowd. He was so angry that his face was red. After he said those harsh words, a few righteous sects immediately stood up and said, "Qiu Wuyuan, speak clearly. Who are you calling shameless?" "I'm calling a bunch of cowards. Whoever wants to cower in this matter, I'll scold them. Whoever wants to fight, I'll play with them." Qiu Wuyuan was too lazy to argue anymore. He could not argue clearly anyway. He would die of exhaustion if he kept arguing with so many people. He happened to glance at Yu Qianzhou just now, and his heart lit up. Although he was not as good with words as Yu Qianzhou and could always reason, he could learn from Yu Qianzhou and act shamelessly, right? Who can still snatch money from me? As soon as the righteous sect stood up, there was no need to mention the 4 generals of the demon clan. A few other sects from the demon clan also stood up. It was fine if they just talked about it, but if they really fought, the other sects from the demon clan would definitely not let the 10,000 demons suffer losses. This time, it was lively. As one of the sects stood up, the second one stood up. In the end, the situation of the 10,000 demons alone became a situation where the righteous and the demon clan were fighting. Qiu Wuyuan's pressure was instantly reduced. He glanced at Yu Qianzhou, who was pinching his chin and watching the show. He thought to himself, no wonder this guy could always stir up big trouble with just a little bit of it. This shameless method was just a try, and immediately one family's problem became everyone's problem. At the same time, he could also save himself some trouble. It was worth learning. The situation was a little out of control. The four great clans had always been neutral. They did not belong to the demon clan or the righteous clan. A few people looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was pinching his chin, and decided to just watch the show. Yu Qianqiu was very happy in his heart. The representatives from the various sects really did not disappoint the sections. They did their best to fight for the greatest benefits for their sections. Everyone, please calm down. I have an idea, but I don't know if everyone is willing to listen to it. Quan Deming from Fu Xian Island saw that the commotion was getting out of hand. He frowned and thought for a while, then immediately shouted. Hearing that there was an idea, and it might even be related to their sects, everyone immediately quieted down and looked at Quan Deming. The latter waved his hand and said, "Everyone, sit down. It's not a solution to keep arguing like this. Listen to me slowly." Xiao Wuyuan took the lead and sat down first. After everyone started arguing, he did not say anything. Instead, he stayed out of it. The people from the various sects also sat down one after another. Chapter 389. Quan Deming stood out like a crane in a flock of chickens. He scanned the crowd and said slowly, "If possible, the top 10 sects of the righteous and demon sects should share the 1 billion. Before he could finish, Yuan Jiokue laughed and said, "That's not a good idea. How can our wealth compare to your supporting Immortal Island? This seems to be unfair. Brother Yuan, why don't you listen to Elder Quan first? I believe Elder Quan won't speak without thinking." Xiao Wuyuan stopped him. In fact, even if there was nothing else, he would agree with this. 20 sects would share 1 billion, and each sect would only get 50 million. This was worth it. Alright, I'll listen to supporting Xian Island's opinion. Yuan Jiokue smiled disapprovingly. Quan Deming nodded and said, 1 billion is not a small number, but it would be a joke to ask the entire Chinese cultivation world to share it. My suggestion is that supporting Xian Island and 10,000 demons each contribute 100 million. Daluo sect, Moon sect, Blood Demon Palace, and Corpse sect each contribute 50 million. Our 6 sects will take 400 million, and the remaining 600 million will be shared by the other 14 sections. What do you all think? Hearing this, other than the top 10 sects of the righteous and demon sects, the other sects all nodded in agreement. They were not allowed to contribute even 1 spiritual stone. It would be strange if they didn't agree. I think it's fine. Xiao Wuyuan also stood up and patted his chest. 10,000 demons will contribute this 100 million. 100 million was far better than 10,000 demons. Plus, 10,000 demons was the leader of the demonic sects, so it was reasonable for them to contribute a little more than the other sections. A leader should have the bearing of a leader. I think it's fine. The Daluo sect, Moon sect, Blood Demon Palace, and Corpse sect naturally wouldn't have any objections. First of all, Fuxian Island and 10,000 demons offered twice as much as them. Second, with their status in the cultivation world, offering 50 million was just an average amount. If they still had any objections, it would be too unreasonable. The other 14 sects felt that it was not worth it. The 600 million would be divided among the 14 sects, and each sect would have to share more than 40 million. It was not much different from 20 sects sharing it equally, but most people agreed. It would not be difficult for them to fork out this amount of money. In addition, the few leading sects had already agreed, so it would not be good for anyone to say no. Thus, it was equivalent to tacitly agreeing. Elder Quan, since we have all paid, how should we divide the 1 billion high-grade spirit stones if we win? Yuan Jiokue suddenly asked. The other sects also stared at Quan Deming. That's right. The matter of splitting the money had to be made clear, otherwise there would be problems later on. That's easy. Quan Deming said eloquently, there are only 20 matches in total. Since 20 sects have paid up, I believe that it won't be a problem for 20 of our sects to randomly send out 20 people. The 20 sects that have paid up can all send their people up to fight. If they win, the sect that pays the money will take back the money that the other sects have to share. The 1 billion earned will be divided into 20 portions. As long as the sect wins one match, they will get 50 million. The number of matches they win will be the same. If the sect wins all 20 matches, they will take all the 1 billion earned. My supporting Immortal Island will not have any objections. If we lose in the end, everyone can only admit that they are useless. They will definitely not give us the money for free. Huh. Everyone roared with laughter. This was a fair method, so no one had any objections. At least, if they won, they would not lose money. In addition, of course, the more effort they put in, the more benefits they would get. This logic was reasonable everywhere. Just when everyone thought the problem had been solved, Yuan Jiukui suddenly stood up and said. I still feel that something is wrong. This was a good method, and it was already considered fair. What was wrong with it? Qiu Wuyuan turned around and said with a slight frown, Brother Yuan, could it be that you have another brilliant idea? Yuan Jiukui pointed at the 4 major families and said in a clear voice, the combined strength of the 4 major families is not weaker than some of the top 10 sections. I think the 4 major families should also participate. The remaining 600 million will be divided equally among the 15 families. Each family will get 40 million, which is just right. He suddenly realized that something was wrong. How could he easily believe the words of that scoundrel, Yu Qianzhou? But he had tacitly agreed not to pursue the matter. Thinking about it, he felt uncomfortable. When he remembered that the 4 major families were on the same side as Yu Qianzhou, he came up with this idea. If they won this challenge, they could talk about it later. If they lost, they could let the 4 major families lose some money. It could also make those people feel disgusted. Everyone knew that Yuan Jiukui still had grievances in his heart. They all looked at the 4 major families. Presumably, the 4 major families would not be able to refuse in this situation. Sure enough, Bai Shan stood up and said, although the 4 major families do not belong to the righteous or demonic sects, we are also part of China. It is reasonable for us to contribute money. After saying that, he sat down. This was also a sign of agreement. Yu Qianzhou was happy in his heart. He was worried that he could not find an excuse to intervene and make money. Now, the opportunity came to him. That kid outside did not beat him for nothing. Since the 4 major families have agreed, if there is no other objection, then this matter is settled. Quan Deming asked Qiu Wuyuan, Elder Qiu, what do you think? I have no objection. Just let me know when you want to pay. 10,000 demons will not refuse. Qiu Wuyuan laughed. He was in a good mood now that a troublesome matter had been solved. Quan Deming nodded and said to the crowd, the other party has more than 50 experts in the crossing calamity stage and 2 in the final stage. If you want to take this opportunity to make money, you might as well call for experts from your sect. This is much faster than us working hard to earn spirit stones from the spirit stone mine. Everyone laughed and suddenly became spirited, as if it was not difficult to make money. Most people felt that this matter did not concern them and finally did not have to worry. After the matter was settled, the group of people dispersed, leaving a large pile of praying mats on the ground. Naturally, the unlucky disciples on duty would come to clean it up. Ignoring the strange gazes of the outsiders, Yu Qianzhou and the others followed Bai Shan to the Bai family's shop. They had something to discuss. There were some decorations here, so their conversation would not be easily overheard. The shopkeeper of the Bai family's shop had already heard about Yu Qianzhou beating people at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance. He was speechless when he saw him. It was hard to imagine how the family could be entangled with such a person. After leading them to the back, the shopkeeper left. The matters of the higher-ups were not something that a shopkeeper like him could care about. The date set by the Cultivation Alliance and Yen Bugue was tomorrow. Remembering that the other party had 2 experts in the final stage of the crossing calamity stage, after a discussion, Bai Shan said solemnly, "Since we have agreed to participate, we must prevent accidents. I will send a message back now and ask the family to invite 2 elders to come here overnight in case of emergencies." The others also nodded and felt that this was appropriate. Unexpectedly, Yu Qianzhou rubbed his hands and laughed. "That is too troublesome. Why bother 2 elders to come here overnight? I have an idea, but I don't know if I should say it." Wasn't he talking nonsense? If he said it, how could the people of the 4 families not let him say it? The attitude of the 8 people immediately became respectful. Bai Shan cupped his hands and said, "If you have something to say, please say it. We are all ears." Ha, ha. Yu Qianzhou couldn't stop laughing shyly. He seemed to be a little embarrassed. After a while, he rubbed his hands and said, "This is what I think. For this challenge, the 4 families just need to put their names on it. I will pay the 40 million, and Ze and I will fight. You don't have to worry about it. As for that, if we win, haha. You know that I am a little short of money. We can keep the money we win for the time being. What do you think of my idea? For money again." The few people looked at each other. Bai Shan looked at him and said suspiciously, "I wonder what stage has Mr.'s cultivation reached? Please tell us, so that we can be prepared." Ha! Yu Qianzhou laughed and said, "I am really ashamed. I am still in the early stage of nascent soul." The few people looked at each other and didn't say anything. Although it was already very fast for him to reach this stage at his age, this challenge was not a trivial matter. It was not a matter of life and death. Bai Shan shook his head and said, "Please forgive me, mister. I dare not let you take this risk. If there is any accident, I really can't explain to the family." "What are you afraid of? Isn't Luo Qingtian at the crossing calamity stage? Didn't you still lose to me in the end? You don't have to worry. It is settled. Send the news back. If the 4 families have any objections, let them come to me. You don't need to explain anything." Yu Qianzhou seemed to be more interested in money than his life. He turned around and said to Ze, "I will leave the last stage of the crossing calamity stage to you. Do you have the confidence to win?" "Yes." Ze nodded. At the side, Bai Zizong and the other 3 looked at Ze with complicated expressions. There was a hint of admiration in their gazes. She was beautiful, pure, and had an extraordinary temperament. In addition, she had a high cultivation base and a mysterious background. She was indeed quite tempting. This time, the 4 of them had been sent here to build a good relationship with Yu Qianzhou. However, at the same time, they had received a rather ambiguous mission. If possible, it would be best if they could develop feelings for Ze. Other than Wu Licheng, the other 3 were a little unwilling at first because they had never seen her before. Who knew what kind of person she was? But they also knew that for a big family like theirs, sometimes they couldn't make decisions about relationships. However, when they saw Ze, they were all attracted. They didn't expect a cultivator in the last stage of the crossing calamity stage to be so young and beautiful. They were immediately attracted. However, such a beautiful woman was ordered around by Yu Qianzhou as a maid. It was really a pity. However, they were relieved. Yu Qianzhou clearly didn't have any other relationship with Ze. When you attack, don't be soft. If you can kill them, don't let them go. Even if you let them go, they won't be grateful. Before you go, think about what my master did when 16 soul-forming cultivators joined hands to fight against him. As long as they are your opponents, don't let any of them go. Don't be soft. Kill them all. Yu Qianzhou warned earnestly. He was afraid that Ze would be soft because she didn't have much experience. In a battle of life and death, she would be at a disadvantage. This girl was most convinced by Bai Changchun. At this time, he could only bring up Bai Changchun to strengthen her confidence. However, when these words fell into the ears of the four families, they were shocked. They all knew who Yu Qianzhou's master was. In other words, their ancestors' cultivation was so strong that it was shocking. Chapter 390. Ziyi's gaze instantly became firm, and she nodded her head seriously. Bai Shan cupped his hands and bowed to Yu Qianzhou excitedly. Sir, can you tell us in detail about the Battle of the East Sea that you mentioned just now? The people of the four great clans all cast expectant gazes at Yu Qianzhou. The legendary Battle of the Soul Formation stage was indeed worthy of admiration. Furthermore, the most powerful protagonists were their own relatives, so the anticipation was even stronger. Tell you in detail? Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He thought to himself, I heard it from Nongzhu, that old handsome guy. How can I tell you in detail? He looked serious and sighed, I can only be fascinated. It's indescribable, indescribable. That kind of realm is beyond our reach. Let's not talk about it. Ze rarely spoke in front of outsiders. At this moment, she clenched her fists and said in a woman's voice, Elder Bai is undoubtedly the most powerful cultivator in the world. Ze will admire you for life. Her words were even more inspiring than Yu Qianzhou's. The people from the four major families were extremely excited, especially the people from the Bai family. They blushed and couldn't express their emotions for a long time. Ah! Ze, let's go back. Yu Qianzhou turned around and kept shaking his head and sighing as if he had really seen the battle. Ze followed him and left, leaving the people from the four major families to daydream. They imagined how the thin elder in the portrait in the ancestral hall of their family looked in reality. He was undoubtedly the most powerful cultivator in the world. If I can't see our ancestor once in this life, Bai Zizong will regret it for the rest of my life. Bai Zizong, who had been standing in silence for a long time, suddenly said while gritting his teeth. Bai Shan let out a long sigh and said, It's not easy to see our ancestor. Didn't you hear what your father said? The great ancestor was the punishment enforcer of the demon ghost realm and lived in the center of the demon ghost realm. Even if you were at the end of the tribulation transcendent stage, you would not be able to go deep into the demon ghost realm, let alone the place where the great ancestor lived. If you really want to go, the only way is to rely on Yu Qianzhou. If Yu Qianzhou is willing to introduce you, it shouldn't be a big problem. Bai Zizong suddenly turned his head and said, Third uncle, if Li Cheng and the other three could be personally taught by our ancestor, once we succeed in our cultivation, we would be able to learn 1/100th of our ancestor's abilities. Who in the Chinese cultivation world would dare to make things difficult for us? I don't understand why the old ancestor would not care about his own descendants and instead accept an outsider as a personal disciple. Could it be that none of us descendants can enter the old ancestor's eyes? This sudden statement stunned the people of the four families. Tan Fei, Wu Licheng, and Jing Zhua all breathed rapidly. Needless to say, it would be beneficial to be taught by the great ancestor of the world's #1 expert. When the four heirs thought of the extraordinary purple dress following beside Yu Qianzhou, their expressions became a little strange. How dare you? Bai Shan suddenly shouted, Bai Zizong, are you out of your mind? How can the great ancestor's thoughts be guessed by ordinary people? The great ancestor must have his own reasons for doing this. It's not something you can comment on. Third uncle, don't tell me you still don't understand. Bai Zizong pointed in the direction where the two of them went and said angrily, who is the hidden force behind him? Could he really comprehend such a mysterious and strange technique by himself? Who gave him those two treasured sabers? Without a doubt, all of these were given to him by the great ancestor. Otherwise, how could a lowly disciple like him surpass our cultivation base in such a short period of time? He dares to do whatever he wants in the cultivation world because he has the great ancestor's support. I don't understand why the great ancestor would do this. Jealousy always makes people lose their minds easily. When Yu Qianzhou was just a lowly disciple, Bai Shan could still bow down to him. Now, Yu Qianzhou was higher than him in every aspect. Even his seniority was higher than him. When he saw that Zi was obedient to Yu Qianzhou's words, an unknown fire completely ignited the dissatisfaction in his heart. Although Wu Licheng and the other two had similar thoughts, they never had such strong feelings. They were stunned by Bai Zizong's words. They did not expect Bai Zizong to say something like this. Tan Huazong, Jing Shengping, and Wu Anfeng looked at each other. Bai Shan was trembling with anger. He pointed his finger and yelled, "Bastard, kneel down." Bai Zizong clenched his teeth and kneeled in front of Bai Shan. His expression showed his unwillingness. Bai Shan said bitterly, "Without the great ancestor, there would be no 4 major clans. Jealousy blinds your eyes, you can't achieve anything. How dare you talk about the great ancestor's right and wrong? Do you think you're qualified to take over the Bai clan in the future? You treacherous bastard, slap yourself." Slap, slap, slap. Bai Zizong slapped his own mouth without saying anything. He slapped his own mouth again and again. Wu Licheng and the other two did not know what to do. Tan Huazong and the other two quickly advised, "Brother Bai, it's enough to teach him a lesson. It's understandable for a young man to say something rash. You don't have to go overboard." Bai Zizong, who was slapping himself, suddenly stopped. He touched his face, shook his head and smiled bitterly. He kowtowed to Bai Shan and said, "Third uncle, I know I'm wrong. I was blinded by jealousy just now and said something rash. Please forgive me." The few of them were speechless by his sudden change. Yan Bugui and the Cultivation Alliance's challenge location was in a mountain not too far away from the 100 Flowers Valley. To be exact, it should be in a valley surrounded by mountains. It took some effort to choose this place. People could stand around and watch, and the spacious valley in the middle was just right for the fight. There were probably thousands of people on the surrounding mountains. This was the result of the sects restraining their disciples. Otherwise, there would be more people coming to watch the fight. On Yan Bugui's side, there were about 50 people including himself. From their clothes, most of them were cultivators from other clans. These dozens of people stood on the mountain top facing the many cultivators, but they did not show any fear. It was as if they were looking down on the cultivators of China. Both sides had already sent people to the middle to discuss the start of the fight. Ever since Yan Bugui found out that Yu Qianzhou was among the crowd on the opposite mountain top, his eyes rarely moved, filled with hatred. If it wasn't for this guy, his family wouldn't be in such an awkward situation. The husband and wife couldn't be together, they colluded with other clans to protect themselves, and even their sect became enemies. Now that they had reached a point where it was either win or die, there was no way out. How could Yu Qianzhou not notice Yan Bugui, who was the center of attention? Seeing that he kept staring at him, he didn't want to compete with Yan Bugui with his stare, but it was uncomfortable to be stared at like that. He looked around and found the position of the 10,000 demons. They were not far away, so he slowly walked to the side of Qiu Wuyuan and bowed, "Greetings, Senior Qiu." Greetings, greetings, greetings." Qiu Wuyuan looked him up and down. When did this guy become so proactive? It seemed like he was always the one looking for him first. Therefore, with a stomach full of questions, he asked, "Brother Yu, are you looking for me?" The 10,000 demons also looked at him. Nothing, nothing." Yu Qianzhou looked around with a face full of smiles. "The weather today is really good." The 10,000 demons were not in a good mood. None of them were happy that the son of the previous sect leader had caused such trouble. Thinking about the possibility of fighting him again, they felt even more depressed. At this moment, Yu Qianzhou came over to talk about the weather. The group looked at the sky and felt that it was normal. They didn't notice anything special, but they suspected that there was a deeper meaning behind his words. They were all confused. "Are you really okay?" Xiao Wuyuan asked doubtfully. I'm fine." Yu Qianzhou confirmed it again. Then, he was too lazy to talk nonsense beside Xiao Wuyuan. He seemed to be chatting happily with the 10,000 demons from time to time, creating a harmonious atmosphere. The 10,000 demons reluctantly answered him. They didn't have the mood to talk nonsense with him now. But when this scene fell into the eyes of Yan Bugui, who was on the opposite mountain, he was so disgusted that he almost broke his teeth from gritting them. What the hell is this guy doing? Xiao Wuyuan cursed silently. The more Yu Qianzhou said that he was fine, the more suspicious he became. He and Yu Qianzhou had known each other for a long time. At that time, Yu Qianzhou hadn't joined Fuxian Island yet. Once they met, Yu Qianzhou started to flatter Xiao Wuyuan. Xiao Wuyuan already knew that this guy wasn't a good person. What happened later also confirmed his guess. Now that he suddenly acted like this, Xiao Wuyuan started to look around suspiciously. When his eyes met the hateful eyes on the opposite mountain, he was stunned. Then, he understood everything. This guy was obviously using the 10,000 demons to make Yan Bugui angry. He was vicious. Xiao Wuyuan looked at Yu Qianzhou, who was still talking nonsense with the 10,000 demons. His expression changed. He said in a low voice, "Yu Qianzhou, you've achieved your goal. Go back to your position." Senior Qiao, what do you mean by that? Yu Qianzhou pretended to be confused. Please go back. Xiao Wuyuan raised his hand and said bluntly. The dignified Myriad Demon's Palace, the leader of the demonic path, had been used by this fellow like a bunch of blind people. How could they possibly have the nerve to explain themselves so clearly? Yu Qianzhou's expression darkened. He said in a cold voice, "It seems that I'm not welcome in the 10,000 demons. I originally wanted to shamelessly ask to join the 10,000 demons after the competition. That's why I came here to get in touch with you guys. It seems that I was thinking too much. Elder Qiao, please help me thank Palace Leader Bu for inviting me in person. It's not that I don't know what's good for me, but the threshold to join the 10,000 demons is too high. I, Yu Qianzhou, can't cross it. Goodbye." He waved his hand and walked away. The 10,000 demons looked at Xiao Wuyuan in surprise. For someone like Yu Qianzhou, who had mysterious skills and a spiritual treasure, the 10,000 demons couldn't wait to recruit him. Why did you chase him away? One of the late tribulation cultivators who rushed here overnight asked in a low voice, Xiao Wuyuan, what's going on? Xiao Wuyuan was speechless. He thought to himself, did I really think too much and misunderstand? If this guy really wants to join the 10,000 demons, then I. Chapter 391. Some people who were paying attention to Yu Qianzhou saw him strolling to the 10,000 demons side and chatting happily with the top demonic factions people, but for some reason, he came back with a long face. The people from the 4 clans looked at each other. Ze stared at him for a while and finally couldn't help but ask, what's wrong? Yu Qianzhou expressionlessly said, nothing, I just solved a small problem. Ze frowned. Why was he still unhappy after solving the problem? She wasn't a talkative person, so she didn't ask. She followed everyone's gaze to the valley. The challenge was about to begin. Both sides seemed to have reached an agreement. Each side handed over 1 billion spirit stones to a middleman, the 10,000 demons. Right now, the only middleman that could be accepted by both sides was the 10,000 demons. Everything that needed to be prepared was ready, so there was nothing to be said. There wasn't even anyone to judge. It seemed that this kind of battle to the death didn't need anyone to judge. The rules had already been set. Apart from the people who escaped from the valley, the rest had no other choice. One of them died, and the other lived. It was easy to determine the winner and loser. However, once they went on stage, the possibility of them escaping was very low. No sect could afford to lose face like this. They would definitely punish the people who escaped after the battle. The top 10 sects of the righteous and demonic sects had already gathered their experts. Especially the supporting Immortal Island. They had 2 experts at the final stage of the Tribulation Passing stage and 10 experts at the Tribulation Passing stage from the Cultivation Pavilion. Dongfang Chang Ao was one of them. It was obvious that the supporting Immortal Island was complacent and wanted to use this challenge to prove their position as the top sect in the world. The 10,000 Demons, the leader of the demonic faction, was destined to be unable to compete with the supporting Immortal Island in this matter. Those who knew a little about the cultivation world knew that the supporting Immortal Island was in the hands of the Guan clan while the 10,000 Demons were in the hands of the Yen clan. Yen Bugui was the only son of the 10,000 Demons' previous leader Yen Wuchen and the current leader Bu Yunxiao's senior brother. If Yen Wuchen didn't die, the 10,000 Demons wouldn't dare to do anything to him. After the spirit stones were handed over, the valley quieted down. There was only the sound of the mountain wind. Everyone was looking around, not knowing who would be the first to challenge, and who would be the first to accept the challenge. Damn! What were they waiting for? Yu Qianzhou looked around, wishing he could go up first. Unfortunately, his cultivation level was too low. If he went up first, his opponent's cultivation levels would be above the crossing tribulation stage. According to the rules, they wouldn't be able to challenge him, so going up first would be pointless. According to the rules, those with high cultivation bases could not challenge those with low cultivation bases, while those with low cultivation bases could challenge those with high cultivation bases. However, it seemed that the possibility of the second scenario happening was very low, because it was practically courting death. China's cultivation world didn't know much about the foreign cultivation world, so the sects wanted to send someone to explore the world first before making a move. Yen Bugui, on the other hand, knew the situation of China's cultivation world very well. He wanted to see who would go first before sending someone to deal with the challenge. This was one of the reasons why he was determined to win. The mentality of both sides caused a temporary stalemate. Yu Qianzhou decided to wait a little longer when he thought about the possibility of earning 50 million. If no one went up, he would let Ze go. At this moment, Dongfang Chang Ao of the supporting Immortal Island slowly took out a golden spear from his storage bag, attracting everyone's attention. It seemed like the supporting Immortal Island was going to be the first to fight. The supporting Immortal Island was known as the top sect in the world. It might not matter to other sects if this stalemate continued, but the supporting Immortal Island couldn't do this because it was the top sect in the world. Dongfang Chang Ao had been representing the image of the supporting Immortal Island for a long time, so he had to fight first. It's him again. Yu Qianzhou stared at Dongfang Chang Ao with a trace of pity in his eyes. He couldn't help but sigh. Dongfang Chang Ao was simply a desperate man of the supporting Immortal Island. He was always at the forefront. Sigh. Heroes would eventually reach their twilight, and even a fine horse would stumble. If this went on, he was destined to become a tragic figure. A figure flashed, and Dongfang Chang Ao was already standing in the middle of the valley. The luxurious grass covered him up to his knees. He held his spear and shouted, "Middle stage tribulation passing cultivator of the supporting Immortal Island, Dongfang Chang Ao, accepts the challenge. Who wants to die?" His last sentence was especially sonorous, and his voice echoed in the valley for a long time. "Good!" someone shouted. Everyone looked toward the source of the voice and saw Yu Qianzhou taking the lead in clapping and clamoring. Everyone was slightly stunned. Someone from the Cultivation Alliance immediately followed suit. Then, the cheers and applause were continuous, and the atmosphere was immediately livened up. Yu Qianzhou didn't mean anything else. First of all, there was finally someone to light up the fire. Second of all, Dongfang Chang Ao was a real man in his heart. The applause and cheers were not wrong for him. Zi looked at Yu Qianzhou in surprise. She didn't expect the crowd to have such a big reaction. Driven by the atmosphere, she couldn't help but applaud. Wu Licheng and the other two looked at Bai Zizong. Bai Zizong smiled bitterly at them and applauded. Dongfang Chang Ao tilted his head and looked at Yu Qianzhou. He nodded and thanked him. It was enough for a man to be cheered by another man for something that he had held onto for his whole life. In the end, he met Qiu Wuyuan of the 10,000 demons. These two represented the leaders of the righteous and evil sects. For the glory of their sects, they fought for everything and never gave in. Qiu Wuyuan looked at Dongfang Chang Ao with an inexplicable expression. He sighed slightly and looked away. This was the first time he gave in to Dongfang Chang Ao. Only the two of them could understand that kind of feeling. Yu Qianzhou's atmosphere was getting stronger. Dongfang Chang Ao's fighting spirit increased. He suddenly turned around and pointed at Yan Bugui and the others on a mountain. He shouted, "Dongfang Chang Ao is here. Who wants to fight me?" Good. This time, there was no need for anyone to take the lead. The crowd had already pushed the applause and cheers to the climax. Yan Bugui retracted his resentful gaze from Yu Qianzhou. He looked around and snorted coldly. He slowly walked in front of a person and said in a deep voice, "Mr. Yan, I'm sure you've heard of this person. He can be considered a famous figure in Fuxian Island. His golden source spear is an upper-grade magical treasure. He rarely has a match. Although your cultivation is similar to his, and the black dragon whip in your hand can more or less restrain the spear, don't underestimate him. I'll leave this battle to you. I've long wanted to meet this person." The cultivator called Mr. Yen chuckled. He gently pulled on a long black whip that was tied to his naked upper body, and it smoothly slid into his hand before coiling into a bundle. He swept down from the mountain and stood about 10 meters away from Dongfang Chang Ao. He chuckled and said, "Xiushui country's tribulation passing middle stage cultivator, Yan Biao, is here to challenge you." As soon as he arrived, the surrounding area immediately quieted down. All eyes were focused on the two of them. When Dongfang Chang Ao saw the whip in Yan Biao's hand, he slightly raised his eyebrows. He raised his spear and shouted, "Foreign cultivator, how dare you mess with the Chinese cultivation world? Die!" The spear turned into a phantom and smashed down. Dongfang Chang Ao made the first move. With a loud boom, a long, deep hole appeared on the ground. The air wave sent the surrounding weeds flying. Yan Biao couldn't be hit just like that. He had already disappeared. I've long heard of Dongfang Chang Ao's great name. Now that I see it, you're so clumsy. The voice came from the sky. Yan Biao stopped in the air. The long whip in his hand had already been released. It was like a spirit snake flying in the air. It was extremely nimble. The people of the Cultivation Alliance were shocked. The Chinese cultivation world was good at using flying swords, but this was the first time they had seen someone using a whip. The two late-stage tribulation passing elders of Fuxian Island were called Ji Nian and Fan Benlei. Their faces revealed a faint trace of worry. The whip could restrain the spear. In addition, it could be used like a sword. They were afraid that Dongfang Chang Ao would be in danger. Dongfang Chang Ao didn't even raise his head. He straightened his spear and pierced the sky. Whoosh! A golden light shot out from the spearhead and shot toward Yan Biao. While Yan Biao was speaking, his hands were already forming messy hand seals. The long black whip coiled up in the air. The raised whip head was pitch black like a cone, as if it was refined from a beast's horn or tooth. When the golden light shot over, Yen Biao didn't dodge. He pointed his finger, and the long whip whizzed out. The cone-like whip head directly collided with the golden light. Bang! A wave of air exploded. The golden light shot out from the spear was instantly defeated in the air. The long whip, however, shot toward Dongfang Chang Ao like an arrow. Everyone watching was shocked by the sharpness of the whip. At the same time, they were worried for the person below. Dongfang Changao raised his head and took a glance. Then, he shot into the sky and swung his spear horizontally. With a pang sound, he directly knocked away the whip and raised his spear to chase after Yen Biao in the sky. The latter smiled ferociously. He raised his hand and pointed. Dongfang Chang Ao suddenly felt that something was wrong. He quickly glanced to his left and right. Suddenly, he heard a whoosh sound coming from behind him. He looked back and saw that the whip that he had just knocked away was coming again. Bang! He turned around and raised his spear to knock the whip away again. But the whip was just knocked away. It bounced in the air and came back to life. In the blink of an eye, it wrapped around him again. Dongfang Chang Ao didn't have time to care about Yen Biao. He waved his spear and fought with the strange whip. On the other hand, Yen Biao, who was in the air, only needed to control the whip with ease. Dongfang Chang Ao was already at a disadvantage. If this continued, he would consume too much of his true essence. If his reaction was a little slow, he was afraid that he would be at a disadvantage. Yu Qianchou could see that Dongfang Chang Ao wasn't really inferior to that guy. The key was that the guy's whip was too strange. It couldn't be killed or broken. It was really entangled. Dongfang Chang Ao couldn't display his strength at all. Damn it! No one knew what would happen next. Losing one more round might decide the outcome of the battle. This was related to the ownership of 1 billion yuan. I've invested 40 million yuan. I can't lose money no matter what. Yu Qianchou frowned. He suddenly turned to Bai Shan and asked, if someone threw a treasure down the mountain and happened to be picked up by Dongfang Chang Ao, it wouldn't be against the rules, right? Ah. Bai Shan looked at him in shock. He didn't know what he meant. Chapter 392. The people at the side immediately reacted and thought of his two unusually sharp sabers. Could it be that he wanted to throw his sabers out for Dongfang Chang Ao to use? It seemed that the sabers could not be taken away by others. Bai Shan pondered for a moment and said, if someone accidentally dropped something down the mountain, as long as they don't interfere with the battle, it shouldn't be considered a violation of the rules as to who picked it up and who used it. Accidentally? Yu Qianchou looked at Bai Shan and laughed, thinking to himself that this guy really knew how to talk. Looking back at the battle site, the crackling sounds echoed in the valley. Dongfang Chang Ao was still entangled with the whip. Whether it was the spear in his hand that was sharp enough to provoke or smash, it could not hurt the whip at all. Needless to say, to be able to resist the spear in Dongfang Chang Ao's hand, this whip must be an upper-grade magical weapon. The whip was strong and flexible in the air, the head and tail of the whip coordinated with each other to attack. As soon as the tip of the whip was knocked away by the spear, the tail of the whip pierced through the air, causing Dongfang Chang Ao to be extremely busy. It was as if he was in a muddy pond, unable to escape and unable to use his strength. He did not even have the chance to fight with Yen Biao. However, it was not easy for the whip to hit Dongfang Chang Ao. At least under the situation where Dongfang Chang Ao could still sustain his energy consumption, no matter how fierce the whip's attack was, it could not get close to him. However, Yen Biao was still smiling as he looked at Dongfang Chang Ao, who was entangled with the whip. He was very leisurely making hand seals. Great! Yen Bugue and the others at the mountain top also applauded and cheered. If this continued, they would definitely win the first round. The people of the Cultivation Alliance did not look too good, especially those from supporting Xian Island. Losing the first battle would not only affect the Wuxia cultivation world and supporting Xian Island, but also Dongfang Chang Ao would have to live in seclusion on supporting Xian Island for a long time. He would never be able to represent supporting Xian Island again. Hearing the arrogant shouts coming from the other side, Dongfang Chang Ao was enraged. He knew what it would mean if he lost this battle. Therefore, with a red face, he let out a loud shout, then consumed a great deal of Zhen Yuan to continuously shoot out a sharp golden light from the spearhead. Finally, he managed to force the snake-like whip to retreat for a while. His bloodshot eyes glared at the sky, and Dongfang Chang Ao seized the chance to quickly raise his spear and charge forward. Yen Biao was shocked. Actually, he himself was clearly aware that if he didn't rely on the sharpness of his whip, his strength would probably be much inferior to his opponent. Now that his opponent had not completely fallen into a hopeless situation, he ignored the rapid consumption of Zhen Yuan and escaped. He didn't have any magical treasures in his hands. Once his opponent caught up with him, wouldn't it be a dead end? He quickly made hand seals to recall the black dragon whip, and his body also quickly dodged. The golden light from Dongfang Chang Ao's spear barely brushed past his feet, and Yen Biao was immediately scared out of his wits. What a fast speed! His opponent's strength was indeed a notch higher than his. Just a little bit more and he would have lost both his feet. Yen Bugue and the others were also shocked. Since his opponent had dodged, he had already lost the chance to chase after him. The long whip had already caught up with him, and Dongfang Chang Ao was once again trapped in the shadow of the whip. He also understood that once the counterattack just now failed, his opponent would not give him a chance to suddenly get close to him again. The sudden change in the situation made the Cultivation Alliance's morale rise. They didn't expect that they would still fail, and their hearts fell to the bottom again. How could everyone not see that Dongfang Chang Ao probably had no chance to win anymore, and now it was just a battle of attrition? Countless people shook their heads in pity for Dongfang Chang Ao. He was obviously strong, but he was tormented by a whip until he couldn't use his strength. They were afraid that the outcome was already decided. Xiao Wuyuan of the 10,000 demons had been staring at the figure entangled by the whip in midair. His eyes were wide open, and they were also bloodshot. His fists were clenched so tightly that there was a muffled sound, and his chest was heaving up and down violently. His opponent of many years might die in such an unjust battle. He suddenly felt that there was a stuffiness in his chest that he couldn't breathe out, and he was about to suffocate to death. He didn't know why either. The situation was grim. It's time to negotiate. Dongfang Chang Ao, you'll have to fight one more time. Yu Qianchou pursed his lips. While everyone was watching with rapt attention, he walked out swaggeringly, and slowly walked to the side of the people from supporting Xian Island. There was still someone in the mood to stroll at this time, and it naturally attracted many people's attention. It was this guy again. Previously, he went to the 10,000 demons side, and this time, he came to supporting Xian Island side. What was he trying to do? Yu Qianchou didn't say anything. The mountain was a little sloped, and he stood under the eyes of the people from supporting Xian Island, silently watching Dongfang Chang Ao brandishing his long whip. The people from supporting Xian Island looked at each other, not knowing what this guy was doing here at this time. Quan Deming was currently the representative here, and he couldn't help but ask, Yu Qianchou, what's the matter? Ah. Yu Qianchou looked back in a daze, and then looked left and right as if he had accidentally walked here. He immediately walked up and moved to Quan Deming's side, cupped his fist slightly, and said, Elder Quan, I have something to ask. I noticed that Elder Dongfang's strength is obviously stronger than Yen Biao, but his spear is restrained by that long whip. I have something I don't understand. Don't you have any treasures that can break this long whip? If you do, why not throw it into the battlefield now? As long as you don't interfere with the duel, it won't be against the rules. Quan Deming turned around to look at the two consecrators behind him and frowned. I don't know what this whip is made of, but it's soft and not strenuous at all. It's not something that can be countered by ordinary treasures, unless there's an exceptionally sharp treasure that can break it in one fell swoop. It's not that our supporting Xian Island doesn't have such treasures, but they aren't in our hands at the moment, and it's too late to go back and get them. At this point, Quan Deming suddenly stopped talking, and everyone from supporting Xian Island also looked at Yu Qianzhou. Speaking of the sharpness of treasures, who had seen a treasure sharper than Yu Qianzhou's sabers? Even the sword of De Luo sect master was easily cut into 3 pieces, so it shouldn't be a problem to deal with this whip. Everyone's eyes lit up, but they immediately remembered that not everyone could pick up the sabers. Dongfang Chang Ao had also tried, but he couldn't pick it up at all. Thinking about it was a waste of time, and everyone shook their heads in regret. Yu Qianzhou nodded, and he rubbed his chin as he muttered, "Speaking of spears, I do have a treasure spear here. Although it's not as strong as my sabers, its sharpness isn't inferior to the sabers, and it might even be better. I just don't know if it can break this long whip." He wasn't afraid that people from other sects would hear him, because if someone released their divine senses to listen in, they would be discovered by supporting Xian Island. His words were no less than a sweet bait, and everyone's eyes lit up. There was actually a treasure spear that was sharper than his sabers, so how could it not break the long whip? Quan Deming was astounded, and he asked, "Yu Qianzhou, is what you said true?" Yu Qianzhou silently turned around, and he frowned. "Elder Quan, this isn't the first time we've met, so when have you seen me lie?" His tone was a little unhappy. "That's not what I meant." Quan Deming explained, "What I meant was, can you take out your treasure spear and let us take a look at it?" Yu Qianzhou looked at the situation of the battle, and he reckoned that Dongfang Chang Ao would be able to hold on for a while longer. Thus, he shook his head and sighed, "Sigh. I have a few good treasures with me, and they were all given to me by a senior. He once told me that unless it's an emergency, I can't simply show these treasures to others, and I can't give them to others to use without permission. I've already promised him, so it's not convenient for me to break my promise. May I know which senior it is? Why don't you tell us?" "Perhaps he has a good relationship with supporting Xian Island," Quan Deming said. "He has been in seclusion for many years, so I'm afraid you won't know him." Yu Qianzhou thought of a person, and he casually made up a story, Nanming Old Ancestor. While Quan Deming was still thinking, the 2 consecrators at the end of the tribulation passing stage behind him exclaimed, "What? It's him?" Yu Qianzhou was slightly stunned. F***ck. I've blown my trumpet. There's really someone in supporting Xian Island who knows Nanming Old Ancestor? Quan Deming turned around and bowed. "Consecrators, is there really such a person? Why haven't I heard of him before?" Ji Nian said with a solemn expression, "It's normal that you haven't heard of him. This person was a person from over 1,000 years ago, and he was a wandering cultivator who hid in the cultivation world. Over 1,000 years ago, when the sect leader of supporting Xian Island went out for a tour, he coincidentally met an expert at the end of the tribulation passing stage. Not only was this person's cultivation level profound, but he was also a top-notch expert in smithing. His smithing skills were simply extraordinary and wonderful. Sect leader Ren wanted to befriend him, but the other party was unwilling to acknowledge him. In the end, sect leader Ren asked for his name, but the other party only said, Nanming Old Ancestor, and left. After that, supporting Xian Island sent people to secretly investigate this Nanming Old Ancestor, but it's a pity that we didn't have the chance to meet him again." "That's right." Fan Benlei nodded and said, "Most people don't even know about this. I've only seen it in the secret records of Nurturing Heart Pavilion." According to sect leader Ren's description, with the smithing skills of that Nanming old ancestor, it shouldn't be difficult for him to forge a treasure spear. But this was already a matter from over 1,000 years ago. If this person is really still alive, then wouldn't he be over 1,000 years old? When everyone heard this, they immediately thought of a possibility. If that person was still alive, wouldn't his cultivation level have already reached the legendary soul formation stage? Think about it, even if Yu Qianzhou was spouting nonsense, it couldn't be so coincidental. Putting aside the fact that the name was the same, to be able to take out such a treasure, wouldn't it coincide with the secret of Nanming old ancestor being a smithing expert? Like I said, I've only heard of this Nanming old ancestor from Healy. How could you possibly know him? Yu Qianzhou's brows moved slightly, and he suddenly sighed and said, "Your sect leader Ren really missed the opportunity to meet Nanming old ancestor. This Nanming old ancestor he loves spirit stones. If supporting Xian Island sect leader Ren could lure him with spirit stones, it wouldn't be difficult to make him stay on your supporting Xian Island. Sigh. He did give me some treasures, but it's a pity that he forced me to search for spirit stones for him. I'm really worried to death." If Nanming old ancestor really heard this, he would probably jump in anger. Who said I love spirit stones? I don't even know who you, Yu Qianzhou, are. When did I force you to search for spirit stones? Chapter 393. Ancestor Nanming liked spirit stones? The people of supporting Immortals Island finally understood why Yu Qianzhou and the purple-clothed lady were so frantically accumulating wealth after their appearance. It turned out that there was an inside story. Ji Nian and Fan Benlei looked at each other. While Yu Qianzhou was looking at the duel in midair, they gave Quan Deming a look. Quan Deming nodded his head in understanding. He turned to Yu Qianzhou and said, "Yu Qianzhou, can we borrow that spear for a while?" Yu Qianzhou paused and said with some difficulty, "I know what you mean. You want to borrow the spear for Elder Dongfang to use, but I promised Ancestor Nanming that I can't easily take out the treasures he bestowed, and I can't let others use them without permission. Otherwise, it's very likely that he will take them back. Elder Quan, you have to know that I'm prepared to use these treasures to save my life at a critical moment. If they were to be taken back, what would I do when I encounter danger in the future? Most importantly, I've always kept my promises. You guys better think of another way. We can pay spirit stones to rent it from Ancestor Nanming. What do you think?" Quan Deming said. Yu Qianzhou smiled bitterly and said, "Elder Quan, it's not that I don't want to promise you, but Ancestor is at the ends of the earth. Even if you rent it from him, I'm afraid that by the time you get the news that he agrees, it'll be too late. Do you think it's still necessary? Can you make this decision on behalf of Ancestor Nanming?" Quan Deming asked. "Me?" Yu Qianzhou pointed at himself and then fell silent. He seemed to be thinking about something in the silence. After a while, he nodded, but then he shook his head and said, "As long as there are spirit stones, I can make the decision. But you guys don't know Ancestor Nanming's character. He won't care about a small amount. His appetite is a little big." It was unknown whether he was feeling guilty when he said this. Was it the Nanming ancestor whom he had never met that had a huge appetite, or was it him who had a huge appetite? Quan Deming glanced at Dongfang Chang Ao, who was fighting in grief and indignation. With a firm expression, he said, "Name a number that the Nanming ancestor can accept. As long as it's not too outrageous, we won't make things difficult for you." The greatest significance of supporting Immortal Island's first appearance was not to win spirit stones, but to save face. For the number one sect in the world, reputation was sometimes more important than spirit stones. Ze and the people from the four major clans were no longer in the mood to watch the fight. From time to time, they would look at the people from supporting Xian Island. They didn't know what Yu Qianzhou was doing with the people from supporting Xian Island. He kept talking non-stop. As for Bai Zizong and the other three who were standing at the back, their gazes often stopped on the graceful silhouette of the lady in purple in front of them, sinking deeper and deeper. Yuan Jiukui from the Six Paths Demon sect had questioned the disciple who was beaten yesterday, but that disciple refused to admit that he spat on Yu Qianzhou. As a result, Yuan Jiukui's hateful gaze couldn't leave Yu Qianzhou today. Now that he had finished visiting the 10,000 demon side, he went to the supporting Xian Island side. At first, he thought that this kid was really capable to be able to win over both the righteous and demonic sections. But now, he felt that something was wrong. Yuan Jiukui looked at the scene doubtfully. Dongfang Chang Ao was in imminent danger, but the people from supporting Xian Island were busy chatting with Yu Qianzhou. Even the two consecrators in the final stage of the tribulation passing realm were hitting on him. This was like seeing a ghost. Could it be that supporting Xian Island wasn't worried about Dongfang Chang Ao's safety at all? Impossible. Dongfang Chang Ao represented the face of supporting Xian Island. This huge doubt made Yuan Jiukui feel as if he had been enlightened. He couldn't help but regret his impulsive actions yesterday. Supporting Xian Island and the 10,000 demons were not kind people. Since the two sects and Yu Qianzhou were so accommodating, they must know something that others didn't. It seemed like he had to spend more effort to investigate. Otherwise, it would be too late to regret when he suffered a loss. Yu Qianzhou lowered his head and pondered when he heard this. He thought to himself, I've played hard to get, so I'm not going to play anymore. Not only will they not believe me, they will also say that I'm greedy. It's not good to play too much. It'll be bad if I lose everything. So he let out a sigh and nodded solemnly. Okay. Since Elder Quan has already put it this way, I'll brace up my courage and make a decision on behalf of Ancestor Nanming. A fixed price of 50 million high-grade spiritual stones is really the lowest I can go. Ancestor Nanming really won't be interested in anything less than this. You can decide for yourselves. It would cost 50 million just to rent it. Even if supporting Immortal Island saved up this amount of money, it would still take many years. The people of supporting Xian Island looked at each other, but they couldn't delay any longer. Dongfang Chang Ao's safety and supporting Xian Island's face were worth more than 50 million. Ji Nian said in a deep voice, Yu Qianzhou, I promise you on behalf of supporting Xian Island. However, I have to say something first. What if the spear isn't as sharp as you said and we make a mistake? I've never lied. Is Senior doubting my credibility? Fine, I'll risk the treasure being taken back by Ancestor Nanming. I'll say this here. If the spear's sharpness isn't what I said, you don't have to give me a single spiritual stone. Yu Qianzhou's face was full of righteousness, and his words were filled with awe-inspiring righteousness. Ji Nian nodded. All right, it's settled then. However, we don't have that many spiritual stones on us, so we'll have to temporarily Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and interrupted him. It's fine to give it to you after the matter is over. I've been on supporting Xian Island for so many years, so I have some confidence in supporting Xian Island. However, I have to make it clear in advance that the spear can't be used by you indefinitely. It's only for Elder Dongfang's match. Supporting Xian Island had never thought of taking his things. Moreover, since Yu Qianzhou was so straightforward, Ji Nian immediately agreed. All right, let's use the spear. I have to remind everyone that Ancestor Nanming is afraid that people will pry into the secrets of the treasures he refined, so he set up extremely powerful restrictions on them. I've asked him to set up the same restrictions on my two treasured sabers, so you must not use your divine senses to check them. Once your divine senses come into contact with them, they'll be immediately damaged, Yu Qianzhou warned. Everyone from supporting Xian Island was astonished. It turned out that the reason why the two sabers could hurt people's divine senses was because of the restrictions. There was actually such a powerful restriction in this world. That ancestor Nanming really wasn't someone an ordinary person could compare to. After everyone agreed, Yu Qianchou put his hand into his storage bag. After searching for a while, he suddenly muttered strangely, "Could it be that I forgot to bring it with me? That's impossible." When everyone heard this, they almost fainted. After wasting so much time talking, he actually said that he forgot to bring it with him. Ji Nian's face was ashen as he said, "Yu Qianchou, are you kidding me? Look carefully." "Oh! I found it, Yu Qianchou shouted. He didn't mean to dawdle, but the huge sabers that he made with his black flames were a little too crude. This time, since he was pretending to be the spear refined by ancestor Nanming, he naturally had to look like a treasure spear. Otherwise, if they were all crudely made, it would be strange if they didn't suspect that they came from the same family. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to fool them even if he wanted to. Thus, after some preparation, he put his hand into his storage bag and used his black flames to carefully suppress it. That was why he spent some time. Everyone from supporting Xian Island's gaze followed Yu Qianchou's hand as it slowly moved. This action instantly attracted the attention of everyone on the surrounding mountains. What were those fellows from supporting Xian Island doing? Dongfang Chang Ao was fighting with his life on the line. Could it be that they still had the mood to do something else? The spear's tail that was slowly pulled out was black. It was formed by two malevolent beast claws, and the fine scales on the claws were vivid and lifelike. The spear's tail had just been revealed when a terrifying feeling of deterrence emanated from the storage bag. Yu Qianchou suddenly pulled out the spear and casually inserted it into the ground beside him. With a pu sound, even the spear's tail could easily be inserted into the mountain rocks. The spear's body was about 2 meters long, and it was completely black. The spear's shaft was as thick as a child's arm, and it looked like it was covered in scales. Upon closer inspection, it turned out that there were 9 angry dragon carvings bearing their fangs and brandishing their claws. They looked as if they were about to leap out of the spear's shaft. From the front, the spear's blade looked like a flat dragon head opening its mouth and roaring angrily at the sky. The spear's blade had broken through the dragon's fangs and emerged from the dragon's open mouth. On top of the original 2-meter-long spear's body, there was a sharp edge that was half a meter long. The center of the spear bulged out while the edges were thin, and it even carried a dense barb. The spear's entire body was pitch black, and it didn't reflect any light in the sunlight. It was truly a mystery what it had been forged from. The moment this spear appeared, the people from supporting Xian Island felt like they had to retreat before even trying it out, and they couldn't help but gasp. Needless to say, just this meticulous carving and this concealed aura meant that this was undoubtedly a treasured spear. The people standing closer to the spear could clearly see the fierce spearhead and were left speechless. Those farther away were also trying to figure it out. Yu Qianchou examined the spear's design and was very satisfied with it. In his rush just now, he had recalled the image of the red dragon in Twilight Valley and applied it to this spear. As expected, the spear's aura was extraordinary. How could he not praise such a masterpiece? Yu Qianchou coughed and solemnly said, "When this spear first took shape, someone used it to kill a 9,000-year-old flood dragon that was on the verge of ascending. Afterwards, the South Bright ancestor placed 9 dragons on the spear's body, calling it the dragon-slaying spear. The dragon slayer who used this spear once praised that the supreme cultivator's treasured spear slays dragons. No one in the world dares to disobey, and the heavenly sword does not appear. The dragon-slaying spear? This spear once slaughtered a flood dragon that was on the verge of ascending." Fan Benlei said in disbelief. The people from supporting Xian Island also stared at the spear, and Ji Nian asked in shock, "The heavenly sword does not appear, and who can contend with it? Does this mean that there is another heavenly spear that can contend with the dragon-slaying spear?" That heavenly sword refers to the heavenly sword, not the spear, but it's also incredibly sharp, Yu Qianchou somewhat awkwardly explained. He thought to himself, I can't talk nonsense anymore. If I continue, great hero Jean will be so angry that he transmigrates to settle the score with me. He quickly changed the topic and said, everyone, shouldn't you quickly hand the spear over to Elder Dongfang? If we continue to talk, I'm afraid there will be a problem. Ah! Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Only now did they remember that they were only looking at the spear, and they neglected the desperate Dongfang Chang Ao. Ji Nian and Fan Benlei nodded at Quan Deming at the same time. Quan Deming grabbed the spear and instantly felt a bone-piercing cold. He couldn't help but praise, good spear. Everyone stepped aside, and Quan Deming walked out with the spear in hand. He transmitted his voice to Dongfang Chang Ao, Elder Dongfang, don't panic. We have already found you the peerless godly weapon, dragon-slaying spear. It will definitely be able to break that strange whip. You must remember, the restriction on this spear is extremely powerful. As long as you don't use your divine sense to check, you will definitely be able to use it safely. Chapter 394. Dongfang Chang Ao, who was trying his best to deal with Quan Deming, took the opportunity to take a glance. When he saw that Quan Deming was indeed holding a black spear in his hand, his spirit was lifted, but he was a little confused. He was good at using spears, so he paid more attention to all kinds of good spears. Where did the dragon-slaying spear come from? Why hadn't he heard of it before? When Yen Bugue saw the spear in Quan Deming's hand, his expression changed immediately. He could guess what was going to happen next. He transmitted a message to Yen Biao, be careful, Mr. Yen. Supporting Xian Island is going to send a spear into the battlefield. This spear might be able to break Mr.'s whip. You must not let it fall into the hands of Dongfang Chang Ao. Yen Biao stopped in mid-air. Although he looked relaxed, he didn't dare to get too close to Dongfang Chang Ao. He was constantly on guard, afraid that Dongfang Chang Ao would launch another sneak attack. He was really shocked just now. When he heard Yen Bugue's telepathic message, he looked towards the direction of supporting Immortals Island. As expected, there was someone holding a black spear. He couldn't help but smile and reply to Yen Bugue, Palace Master Yen is worrying too much. The black dragon whip in our hands is made from a flood dragon that had cultivated for thousands of years. He extracted its tendons, peeled its scales, and refined its bones. How can it be broken by ordinary treasures? Yen Bugue saw that this guy was underestimating his enemy, so he reminded him again, supporting Xian Island is not comparable to ordinary sections. The golden source spear in Dongfang Chang Ao's hands is also an upper-grade treasure. It's just that Mr.'s black dragon whip is able to restrain it. Now that they are taking out something to replace the golden source spear, it's definitely not an ordinary treasure. Mister, you must not be careless. Yen Biao was alert. The two people in the air were looking at the spear in Quan Deming's hand. All the sects also saw some clues and knew that supporting Xian Island had brought out a powerful treasure. Quan Deming looked at the position and transmitted a message, Elder Dongfang, get ready to pick up the spear. After saying that, he threw the spear. A black shadow drew an arc and landed on a protruding boulder at the bottom of the valley. The black spear was inserted into the rock at an oblique angle. There was almost no sound, only the black end of the spear was exposed. All the sects were shocked. It was indeed a treasured spear. Dongfang Chang Ao, who was fighting, was slightly delighted, while Yen Biao was slightly startled. Both of them immediately locked onto that gun. Hi! Dongfang Chang Ao shouted. He had waited for so long in order to think of a way. Now that his fellow sect members had come out to save him with a treasure, success or failure would all depend on the spear below. How could he not give it his all? The spear in his hand shot out 100 spear shadows with all his might. Golden light shone as he forced the black dragon whip away. In a flash, he quickly descended. Dongfang, don't run! Yan Biao shouted. At this time, he was also a little anxious. He made a hand seal, and the black dragon whip chased after Dongfang Chang Ao. Everyone's eyes were focused on the battle between the two. They knew that this was the crucial moment. About 100 meters above the ground, the sound of wind breaking could be heard. Dongfang Chang Ao suddenly stopped, turned around, and used all his strength to shake off the long whip with his spear. Everyone thought that he would be able to pick up the spear below. Unexpectedly, he raised his head and looked at Yan Biao, who was rushing down, and shouted, "Kill!" Then, he raised the golden origin spear and rushed towards Yan Biao. His imposing manner was incomparably valiant. The two of them rushed at each other, and their speed seemed to close in an instant. Yan Biao originally wanted to use the long whip to entangle Dongfang Chang Ao so that he could keep the spear below to avoid any worries. Who knew that Dongfang Chang Ao would turn around and rush back, as if he had set up a trap for him to fall into. The sharp sound of the golden spear pierced through the air, and Yan Biao was almost scared out of his wits. He hurriedly turned around to escape, but it seemed that it was still a little too late. The two of them had already met, and following a cold snort from Dongfang Chang Ao, the golden spear drew out a rain of blood. "Ah!" Yan Biao screamed. One of his thighs was not able to dodge in time, and was cut off on the spot. The Cultivation Alliance immediately cheered, especially Qiu Wuyuan of 10,000 Demons, who was unusually loud and excited. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. This Dongfang Chang Ao was indeed Dongfang Chang Ao. As long as he was given a chance, he could immediately turn the situation around. This kind of wisdom and courage was definitely not comparable to ordinary people. It was no wonder that he could take on such a heavy responsibility in the world's #1 sect, Fuxian Island. Although Yan Biao had lost a leg, his life was still more important. He continued to run for his life, but his vitality was greatly injured, and his speed was already a lot slower. He desperately ran towards the direction of Yan Bugui and the others, shouting loudly, "Two senior brothers, save me!" Among the dozens of people, 2 people immediately rushed out to rescue him. Yan Bugui anxiously shouted, "Don't break the rules." But someone beside him pulled his arm. The 2 people could not care so much now. Their junior brother was about to die, who would care about the rules? At worst, they could just admit defeat. However, the scene that the 2 of them were most worried about still appeared. Dongfang Chang Ao had already caught up to Yan Biao. His expression was as calm as still water, and he raised his spear above Yan Biao's head. The 2 of them immediately shouted, "Show mercy." Yan Biao turned around in horror, only to see a ray of golden light flying towards him. Dongfang Chang Ao had just used the spear 3 times, and his movements were clean and neat. He was indeed someone who had used the spear for a long time. "Ah!" A few pieces of minced meat and blood fell to the ground accompanied by a shrill scream. Yan Biao was finished. The Cultivation Alliance once again cheered non-stop, "Junior brother." The 2 people who were rushing over exclaimed. The 2 people raised their hands and pulled out whips that were exactly the same as Yan Biao's. Dongfang Chang Ao turned around and left, landing on the ground at the fastest speed. Not far away, he saw the ownerless long black whip lying quietly on the ground. He raised his hand and grabbed it, then directly threw it into his storage bag. This could be considered as his spoils of war. Seeing that the 2 people who pulled the whips were picking up the pieces of Yan Biao's body, he looked at the broken leg in front of him. He was afraid that the other party would not let this go so easily. Dongfang Chang Ao first took out an energy recovery pill and swallowed it. At the same time, he stuffed the golden origin spear in his hand into his storage bag. He turned around and grabbed the black spear handle on the boulder behind him. As he grabbed it, his eyes slightly widened. He suddenly pulled out the black Dragon Slayer spear, that was stuck on the boulder and raised it to take a closer look. The long spear was cold and pitch black. The dragon claw held the spear spine, and the 9 dragons' roaming spear was like a raging dragon spitting out cold blades. The entire spear was almost covered by the fine scales of the dragon, and it looked extraordinary. In particular, there seemed to be a huge amount of power contained within it. That kind of terrifying power seemed familiar. Dongfang Chang Ao looked at the fellow sect members of supporting Xian Island in surprise. He had never heard of such a spear in the sect. If there was one, it would have been given to him long ago. He reckoned that it would not have dragged on until now. Elder Dongfang, you have won the first round. The 2 consecrators have summoned you back. Dongfang Chang Ao suddenly received a voice transmission from Quan Deming. He nodded slightly and flew back to the people of supporting Xian Island in a flash. The surroundings were filled with cheers. The Cultivation Alliance had won the first round, and all the sects were cheering. Elder Dongfang is indeed amazing. Yu Qianzhou praised happily. This really made him overjoyed. He had not even used the spear, and he had already earned 50 million. Even if he lost in the end, he could still earn 10 million. If he had known earlier, he would not have spent 40 million. Dongfang Chang Ao was startled. Why was this guy here? He nodded and did not say anything. However, Yu Qianzhou stretched out his hand and said, Elder Dongfang, please return the Dragon Slayer spear to me. This spear is yours? Dongfang Chang Ao looked at the fellow sect members in surprise. Finally, his eyes fell on Quan Deming. The latter nodded silently and said, I borrowed it from Yu Qianzhou for emergencies. I promised him that I would return it to him after 1 round. This. Dongfang Chang Ao's eyes lingered on the spear. He was a little reluctant to part with it. After a little hesitation, he said decisively, Yu Qianzhou, are you selling this spear? Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said, No, no. I won't sell it no matter how much money you give me. Elder Dongfang, please return the spear to me. At this moment, someone in the valley suddenly shouted, Middle stage tribulation passing cultivator, Yen Fang is here to accept the challenge. Dongfang Chang Ao, do you dare to come down and fight me? Everyone from supporting Xian Island looked over. It was none other than one of Yen Biao's senior brothers. It seemed like he wanted to take revenge. Dongfang Chang Ao snorted and turned to Yu Qianzhou and said, Yu Qianzhou, lend me the spear for 1 more round. I will return it to you after I use it. Chang Ao. Ji Nian stopped him and shook his head. Supporting Xian Island has to fight for the first round. Since we have already won, let the other sects do the rest. Supporting Xian Island only needs to make a move at the crucial moment. Dongfang Chang Ao stopped and pondered. He knew that the sects had their own considerations. He could not control his own impulse. He looked at the people at the foot of the mountain and gritted his teeth as he handed the Dragon Slayer spear in his hand to Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou took it and touched it before stuffing it into his storage bag. He bowed to Ji Nian and said, after the challenge ends, I will come back to find you. Ji Nian nodded with a gloomy expression. Just touching the spear had cost supporting Immortal Island 50 million. If he had known that Dongfang Chang Ao would kill like that, he would have just thrown something as a trigger. There was no need to waste so much money. Yu Qianzhou did not care so much. After leaving supporting Xian Island, he went back to the 4 families. Zi popped her head over and asked curiously, I saw it just now. The gun that was thrown down seems to have been taken out by you? Yu Qianzhou looked at her. It was good to have a high cultivation. So many people were blocking and yet she saw it. Actually, it was not just Zi who saw it. Many people saw it. Even if they did not see it, they would have guessed it. If supporting Xian Island really had a spear, they would have taken it out long ago. There was no need to surround him and take out a spear. If it was not his, who else could it be? Yen Biao's senior apprentice brother was still shouting, "What? Dongfang Chang Ao does not dare to come out, but the whole Chinese cultivation world does not dare to come out? Are you all cowards? Who will fight me?" He shouted and scolded for a long time, but no one from the sects came out. The key was that everyone knew how powerful the whip was from Dongfang Chang Ao's battle. Those with the same cultivation as Dongfang Chang Ao would not be able to deal with it better. And the cultivators in the final stage of tribulation passing couldn't come out because of the rules. For a moment, people from the sects looked at each other. That whip was troublesome. Yu Qianzhou looked left and right for a long time. Seeing that everyone was still hesitating, he could not help but laugh. He. Since everyone is so polite, I won't be polite. Ziyi's eyes brightened. You want to go up? His fighting style was always so novel. She liked watching it. He. What do you think? We can't let people laugh at us Chinese cultivation world for not having anyone. Yu Qianzhou's mouth twitched as he drew a machete in each hand and shouted, "I'm coming." You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.